Thank you for coming, everyone, tonight. This is the April 8th meeting of the Water Commissioners. This meeting is televised, just for your awareness. So, for the Water Commissioners.
In your packet, you will find a memo from the Operations Manager of the Water Division, Jack Marsh, requesting that the Water Commissioners vote to enact your annual Phase 2 restrictions. Thank you. This is in compliance with the DEP Water Management Act permit issued by the Commonwealth to Easton. This is a phased restriction that is enacted every spring, the details of which are in your packet. This helps the town meet its conservation requirements, specifically 65 gallons per day per capita, which Jack has reported we did meet last year at 64 gallons of water consumption per day. So he's asking that the board or the commission consider enacting the same.
4,000 or
65 gallons per day per capita.
Capita, okay.
So we do this every year, and there'll be something posted on the website that will talk about the watering days and hours. It's an odd even type of a thing. If you are found to be watering on the wrong day, you'll get a notice taped to your front door that tells you this is a warning. We got one before, so anyone can do it. It was my husband's fault. He had the sprinkler set up on the wrong day.
That's it.
But everybody should look out for that and make sure that you have your sprinklers set on the right day if you're using sprinklers, or that you're watering on the right day. So would somebody like to make a motion to, or is there any discussion on that first, or would someone like to make a motion?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor? Unanimous. And we have minutes also to approve. So the minutes are dated March 12th, 2018. So it was about this time last year.
Mm-hmm.
And some of us weren't on here, so this is just a motion to accept the minutes.
So moved.
Second?
Chuck and Tom, all in favor? Unanimous. Great, thank you. So with that, we will, I would take a motion to adjourn from the Water Commissioners hearing.
So moved.
Second?
That's Craig and Tom, all in favor? Unanimous. Great, thank you. And now I will welcome you to the April 8th Select Board meeting.
We actually are 3 minutes ahead of schedule. The agenda is posted for 6:05.
Oh, all right.
Sorry.
We're going to have to wait 3 minutes until we start the
Sorry,
Select Board meeting. Knew I should have talked a little slower.
Only 2 minutes now, actually.
Okay. Welcome to the April 8th Board of Selectmen meeting. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Also, please note that this meeting is being televised. It is broadcast live, and it will be available on ECAT. And you'll be able to look that up on the computer and watch these meetings as well. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and I will call you up to the microphone and ask you to state your name and address for our record. If you're somebody that's going to be presenting or speaking, if you'd like to come up and sit at the table with the microphone there, that would be great too. So the first item that we have is announcements and proclamations. The Easton Water Division Annual Open House. As you can see up on the screen, it's the 35th Annual Open House, April 27th, from 10 a.m. to 12 noon at Bay Road in Easton. They judge the poster contest for the school-age kids, and it's really one of the most fun things during the year to do. They'll have a cookout out back with like the best hamburgers, and there's a lot of fun things for the kids. And the kids get prizes, and it's really a lot of fun. So if you can make it, that's always a great event. The next thing that we have is the Water Division's Hazardous Waste Collection Day, which is also very popular for Easton residents, Saturday, April 20th, 8 a.m. to 12 noon at the DPW. This is done in conjunction with the Lions Club. And usually you'll notice it because the lines of traffic are down the street that day. This is the day that everybody gets rid of, they do their cleaning their garage and their spring cleaning. There's also shredding on site this day too. So this flyer is, it's on the website, and it will be in the Easton Crier, Town Crier, that will give the list of all the things that you can bring and not bring. Next up is the Arbor Day proclamation. Tom, if you want to read that proclamation for us.
I'd be happy to. The Arbor Day Proclamation for 2019. Whereas the legislators of the Great and General Court of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts have adopted an act regarding the designation of Arbor Day throughout the Commonwealth. And whereas the purpose of the designation of Arbor Day throughout the nation is to encourage the planting of shade and forest trees, to encourage the harvesting of forest crops by approved conservation methods, and to encourage the protection of our forests from the scourge of devastating fires, insects, and diseases that destroy the beauty and usefulness of woodlands as well as their wildlife. And whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, produce oxygen, clean the air, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees increase property values and beautify our community, and whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal and provide an enduring heritage to succeeding generations. Now, therefore, we, Selectmen of the Town of Easton, do hereby proclaim Friday, April 26th of the year 2019, as Arbor Day in the Town of Easton, and urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day and to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands. And further, we urge all citizens to plant trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of this and future generations.
Thanks, Tom. So Easton has long been a Tree City USA, which is a pretty good designation. And planting trees really helps curb the greenhouse gases from our automobiles. So it's pretty important, and thank you for doing that.
You're most welcome.
The next one is Parkinson Awareness Month, and we'd like to ask Mr. Cohen if you'd like to come up and talk about that. Sure, Mr. Cohen was here last year to introduce us to this organization, and we're happy to have you back this year.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak here. I understand very briefly this evening. My name is Larry Cohen. I have been a resident of the town of Easton now for close to 20 years. And approximately 7 years ago, I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. This came after 25 years of starting and building my own company. And it was at that point in time when I knew that this being a progressive disease, I was going to be running out of energy to run what had become an international company. So for me, and for many Parkinson's sufferers, one of the things that comes about is you are forced to make changes that you would otherwise not want to make. So I had spent some 25 years in the area of research and development of industrial chemicals. It was only natural that I would then dedicate my efforts to doing research and development on a cure for Parkinson's disease. And so I have worked closely with the Fox Foundation in New York, who is probably one of the leading organizations internationally for the research and development on Parkinson's cures. They have funded approximately $800 million in grants since their inception of May 2000. And although we are getting closer, we are not there. So Michael J. Fox frequently will say, our objective is to put ourselves out of business, meaning that what we want is a cure. Historically, Parkinson's was identified exactly 200 years ago by a physician by the name of James Parkinson, who upon wandering the streets of early 19th century London, noticed a significant number of people who were doing things like this. And as he studied it at that time, he wrote a first book called The Shaking Palsy. And I would say, as the years have gone on, Parkinson's is still best known, through Michael J. Fox and others, as a disease that produces tremors. For those of us who have it, it basically comes about through the death of neurons in our brain and the ability of the remaining neurons to adequately communicate with our muscles. So you will see such things as shaking, what is called frozen gait, where you simply can't move forward, a declining volume in voice, fatigue, sleeping problems. There is a whole gamut and array of characteristics associated with it. For a long while, there was no treatment for Parkinson's. And 1969 brought a change in that with the introduction of a medication called L-DOPA. And L-DOPA has been extremely effective in reducing the effects and symptoms of Parkinson's. But like all medications, it's not perfect. Regrettably, in the 50 years since L-DOPA came on the market, there has been no replacement for it. And we are working hard to try to change that. And one of the ways of making that effort is to publicize and make people aware of the disease. It is a disease that afflicts approximately 1 million people here in the US and about 5 million worldwide. We are fortunately at a point in time when there are a number of, not breakthroughs, but interesting findings in the area of research and development. Foremost amongst that is a material called alpha-synuclein. And alpha-synuclein appeared in some 50,000 research papers last year. It is the result of proteins in the body which misfold and then interfere with the ability of one neuron to speak to and give instructions to the next neuron. Fortunately, although we don't have a cure, there are 5 separate vaccines, experimental, that are in phase 2 clinical trial to be used for the treatment of Parkinson's. For people like me, that's exciting, but the way research and development moves forward in medical research, it's going to be several more years before it comes about. So there is alpha-synuclein, and then there are a number of other drugs that are so-called repurposed drugs. These are drugs used for other maladies that have been found to have benefits for Parkinson's. Most notable amongst them is a drug called nilotinib, which is a very effective leukemia drug that is presently in the marketplace and is also presently in a phase 2 clinical trial for Parkinson's. Having been in research and development for years And having been in the business of selling chemicals, when I hear about such things, I immediately go to Google like everybody else. And what I find is that the monthly use of nilotinib currently costs about $10,500. So a wonderful drug. It's unlikely to be approved by too many insurance companies. But we hope as things go forward that we find a way to reduce that. And the last thing that I'll mention, since I know time is limited, is that one of the most effective treatments for this disease is simple exercise. This property called neurogenesis, whereby the brain develops new brain neurons, actually occurs while you are engaged in aerobic exercise, whether it be bicycling, swimming, running, and guess what? It doesn't cost anything. You can go out there and do it anytime you want. So as I talk to people, one of the messages I send, no matter what else you may be doing, make sure that you also include some exercise in your daily regimen. There is one further thing that I'll mention, because there's always new work being done, and that is, although this is a brain disease, there is a nerve that connects the brain to the microbiome, the gut, which is called the vagus nerve. And there is very exciting work going on at Caltech in Pasadena, California, which indicates that there is a major role played by chemicals in your microbiome affecting the performance of your brain. For me as a scientist, the most exciting thing going on right now. Well, I do volunteer for the Fox Foundation, and one thing I would like to do for anybody who is interested, I brought along some research. This is not for sales purposes. I'm out here to promote those people who can help, and I'd just like to leave this. Anybody who's interested, feel free to take a copy. It is their 2019 version. And for anybody who would be interested in speaking further to me, I would also like to leave some of my Fox Foundation business cards. There are approximately 130 people like me around the U.S. who are Parkinson's patients and also working in conjunction with Michael J. Fox in order to bring about a cure.
Well, thank you very much. You certainly are an excellent ambassador for this cause, and we really appreciate you coming and bringing this to our attention. Craig will read the proclamation.
Parkinson's Awareness Month Proclamation 2019. Whereas Parkinson's disease is a chronic, progressive neurological disease and is the second most common neurodegenerative disease in the United States, and whereas there is inadequate data on the incidence and prevalence of Parkinson's disease, but it is estimated to affect nearly 1 million people in the United States, and that number is expected to more than double by 2040. And whereas Parkinson's disease is the 14th leading cause of death in the United States, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and whereas there are millions of Americans who are caregivers, family members, and friends greatly impacted by Parkinson's disease, and whereas it is estimated that the annual economic burden of Parkinson's disease is over $26.4 billion per year, and indirect cost to patients and family members totals $6.3 billion. And whereas research suggests the cause of Parkinson's disease is a combination of genetic and environmental factors, but the exact cause is in most individuals is still unknown. And whereas there are currently no objective tests or biomarker to diagnose Parkinson's disease, and whereas there is no known cure or drug to slow or halt the progression of the disease, and available treatments are limited in their ability to address patient needs, medical needs, and remain effective over time, and whereas the symptoms of Parkinson's disease vary from person to person and can include tremors, slowness of movement and rigidity, gait and balance difficulty, speech and swallowing disturbances, cognitive impairment and dementia, mood disorders, and a variety of other non-motor symptoms. And whereas volunteers, researchers, caregivers, and medical professionals are working to improve the quality of life of persons living with Parkinson's disease and their families, and whereas increased research, education, and community support services are needed to find more effective treatments and provide access to quality care to those living with the disease today. Now, therefore, we, the Selectmen of the Town of Easton, do hereby proclaim April as Parkinson's Awareness Month in the Town of Easton, given under our hand and the seal of the Town of Easton, this 8th day of April in the year of our Lord, 2019.
Thanks, Craig. Anybody have any questions or comments? Well, we really appreciate you bringing this to us, and, you know, a lot of people watch our selectmen meetings, so they'll know you, they're going to have your name, and if people are interested in getting more information, they can certainly reach out to us, and we'll put them in contact with you. We'll sign the proclamation and send that to you, and we look forward to having you back next April.
Okay, well, again, my sincere thanks to all the members of the board for putting this on your agenda. I appreciate it personally, and on behalf of the Michael J. Fox Foundation, I extend their appreciation as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Colin.
We don't usually get applause at these meetings, so that's great.
Pretty good.
I'll try not to let it go to my head. Thank you very much, one and all.
Okay. So next, we have Stonehill College Derby Day fundraiser at the Sally Blair Sports Complex, room 120, 320 Washington Street, Easton. Stonehill has applied for a one-day all-alcohol license for a Derby Day fundraiser to be held on May 4th, 2019, from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. at Stonehill College, the Sally Blair Sports Complex, Easton. An Easton police detail is not required for this event. Would someone like to make a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Craig and Tom, all in favor? Unanimous. Stonehill College again, their spring dance at the Sally Blair Ames Sports Complex Fieldhouse, 320 Washington Street, Easton. Stonehill College has applied for a one-day beer and wine liquor license for a spring dance to be held on April 26, 2019, from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. at Stonehill College, 320 Washington Street, at the Sally Blair Ames Sports Complex Fieldhouse. An Easton police detail is not required for this event. If someone would like to make a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Chuck and Tom, all in favor? Unanimous. Temple,
Chaya Shalom.
thank you, Craig. Art auction fundraiser, 329 Depot Street. The Temple has applied for a one-day beer and wine liquor license for an art auction fundraiser to be held on May 4th, 2019, from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. At the Temple on 239 Depot Street. One Easton Police Detail officer is required for this event.
David Flashenberg is here if you wanted to you wanted to say something, David, about the event?
Come on up. If you want to tell us a little bit about the event and if the public is invited, and if so, how can they get tickets?
So the event, as you said, is going to be on May 4th, the evening from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. We're going to be auctioning off art from well-known artists, as well as sports memorabilia and travel packages. Again, we're hoping that you do approve the beer and wine. We'll also have a light Mediterranean fare available at the event. And the public is invited. Tickets are available. Either you can go to the Temple's website, the Temple Chaya Shalom, or you can contact me directly, and we would be happy to have anybody interested in coming to the event would be appreciated. Tickets are $25 per person.
Great. And just for spelling, for people that wanted to look that up at home, it is going to be in our packet online, but it's Temple, Chayai Shalom.
Yes.
So, okay. Anybody have any questions?
I'll recuse myself.
Somebody like to make a motion in a second?
So moved?
Second?
Tom and Chuck, all in favor? We have 4 yes and 1 recusal.
Have a great event.
Thank you.
Thank you
Good
very
luck with
much.
your event.
Thank you, David.
Next is Simpson Spring Easton Day, 719 Washington Street, Easton. Simpson Spring has applied for a one-day beer and wine liquor license for an Easton Day to be held on April 27th, 2019, from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. at Simpson Spring, 719 Washington Street, Easton. A police detail is not required for this event. And we don't have
I believe
anyone?
we do have somebody.
We do? Yeah. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you back there. Come on up. Want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your event?
I am Thomas Sangargiola, and I'm here on behalf of Simpson Springs. And the event is April 27th, like you said, and it's we're going to host Shoveltown Brewing. And we think it draws a lot more business for our vendors, and it kind of gives people a reason to drive down the bumpy road. So we appreciate the continued support and allowing us to serve beer there. It's been very good for the business. So.
You want to tell us a little bit about the tours and about the other vendors that you have?
Yeah, so we have all kinds of vendors from soaps to handmade scarves and stuff like that. And we have Dave, the barrel guy. He's a very popular person. He sells wine and whiskey barrels. And the tours are at 11 and 1 on Saturday. And if you can call at 508-238-4472 if you want to schedule a tour with me during the week. But yes, on Saturday we have a free tour at 11 and 1.
So the oldest bottling company?
Oldest independent bottling company. And recently, just to plug something, we were featured on Channel 4, WBZ. They did a little segment for us, so feel free to go on their website and check that out.
That's great, right
Good
here in
segment.
Easton.
Yeah,
good.
it was.
Thank you. Okay, if somebody would like to make a motion for that.
So moved.
Second?
Craig and Chuck, all in favor? Unanimous.
Thank you
Thanks
guys
so
for the
much.
support.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great event.
Next, Shoveltown Brewery. The second anniversary celebration of the Shoveltown Brewery, 50 Oliver Street, rear parking lot. Shoveltown Brewery has applied for a one-day beer and wine license for the second anniversary celebration to be held on April 13th, 2019, noon to 8 p.m. at the Shoveltown Brewery. An Easton police detail is not required for this event.
Hi, and thank you for having me. Frank Altieri from Shoveltown Brewery. And we were so excited for our second annual Spring Fest to celebrate our second anniversary in Easton. The people in Easton and as well as the government has been really supportive of us, and we really like to thank you for that. Our event is going to have some outdoor games for people, and then it's also, we're going to have things set up in the parking lot that will be very interesting to people to see. We've asked some community groups to be part of it. This event will benefit the Easton Food Pantry. But in the future, we're thinking about some other organizations that we would also support. Part of our mission statement is to give back to the community where we can, and this is one of those events that we do that with.
Okay. So are you going to have the road closed off of the entrance going in when you say the games are outside? Where
Yes, so we asked for we already have a liquor license for the interior.
Yeah.
This is for the parking lot. So we closed the parking lot off. We've made an agreement with the YMCA to park in their lot that's adjacent, plus the rest of 50 Oliver has an extensive amount of parking also, so there'll be plenty of parking. And we've done this event and a similar event before and have not had any issues with parking or problems with that. We do have music at this event, but that's covered under our entertainment license inside, and that's where the music will be inside. So we just have more opportunity to serve people in an outdoor environment.
Okay, great. Well, you guys have always been a good partner and very respectful to the neighborhood, because I do live in that neighborhood, so.
We try our hardest.
Okay.
Some things get by us every once in a while, but.
And it's just open to the public?
It is open to the public. We ask for a $5 donation or to bring a non-perishable food item for the Easton Food Pantry, or you can do both. That would be good too.
Okay, great. Well, it's hard to believe it's only been 2 years. It feels like it's been a lot longer than that. You've become a fixture in the community, so thank you for choosing Easton to have your business.
Thank you very
I was
much.
there on Saturday, and I drove by it. It was packed at noon, at 3 o'clock, and it was packed, and we went there at about 9 o'clock at night. So congratulations to you.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
If somebody would like to make a motion and a second on this?
So moved.
Second.
Craig and Tom, all in favor? Unanimous. Great. Good luck with the event.
Have a great
Thank you very
event.
much.
Thank you.
And next, the last is Douglas King Builders, Mansfield Credit Union fundraiser, Water Point 8 Island Court, community room, and adjoining patio. Doug King Builders has applied for a one-day beer and wine liquor license for Doug King Builders and Mansfield Credit Union fundraiser to be held on April 15th, 2019, from 5:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. at Water Point 8 Island Court, the community room and adjoining patio, Easton. An Easton police detail is not required for this event. Is there anyone here from that? Okay.
Does not appear to be.
Somebody like to make a motion in a second?
So moved.
Second?
Craig and Tom, all in favor? Unanimous. Great, thank you.
6:30.
6:30, we're going to be going to the Easton Shoveltown Cultural District Management Partners Team volunteer appointment interviews. So I think I just want to start by just giving a brief description of what the cultural district is, and I'm trying to look for it on here, but it's not very succinct in what I'm looking at. Carolyn, do you want to just come up and just give us a quick overview?
Hi, I'm Carolyn Cole, 39 Caroline Road, Easton. And right now I'm the chair of the Easton Shoveltown Cultural District. The district was formed because we were fortunate that when Duval Patrick was governor, he passed a bill into law which allowed us to, all the towns and cities, to develop a cultural district. The idea behind the district was really to stabilize the economy. And they have, with research has shown that by bringing art, music, appreciation of history and science into the townships and the districts and will facilitate the economy to be stabilized, and helps our school system, helps the people stay in the town, helps small businesses prosper because people will spend money in town rather than going out of town. And basically that's what it's about. Our mission is to to let everybody know what our resources are, and they are tremendous in Easton. Library, lot of active organizations, open spaces, and to make people aware of the usage that we can have with that. And we've done that by having events and supporting other agencies and organizations and businesses with different types of events. And trying to connect with the community is our biggest aim.
Great. And there's not a lot of cultural districts in the state. It's very hard to get the designation. A lot of work goes into it. And Carolyn has championed this from the beginning with numerous events every year. So I just want to thank you and to the team that stood behind you to do this. One of the other important things about the events that this group has is that they're really geared to be low or no cost, and because the arts and culture should be available to the whole community, whether people can afford it or not. And you've done a really good job with that, trying to host. I know that that's a real priority for you.
Yes, it has been.
So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So with that, we're going to do the interviews. I have them in an order in my packet here, and I'm just going to go through them in order. So the first applicant is Suzanne Bump. She could not be here tonight. She is the state auditor. She just did a presentation here for us a few weeks ago. She spent most of her professional life in and around government. She's deeply committed to public service. She has significant experience in conducting public business in an open and transparent manner. She's a new resident to our town, and she values the unique historic, cultural, and environmental attributes of the neighborhood, and she's seeking an opportunity to participate to help best balance the preservation with the goals of public access and commercial activity. So just a little background on her because she can't be here. The next one is Pam Borbley. You want to come up, Pam? It's like the lineup. introduce yourself and just
Sure.
briefly tell us a little bit about yourself and your
My name
background.
is Pam Borbay. I have been working with Carolyn for a number of years, almost, I think, since the inception, 5 years, on the cultural district. I do the artwork, all of the design work that goes into posters and flyers, rack cards, that type of thing, for all the events, and then I help out at the events, coordinating all the different parts and all the moving pieces that go into hosting successful events.
Thank you very much. Anybody have any questions for Pam? Thank you.
Yeah.
Next is Kristen Stone. You wanna come up, Kristen?
Okay. Hi, I am Kristen Stone at 8 Picker Lane. I've been a resident of Easton for about 9 years. I am the co-founder and director of Keep Easton Beautiful. And I met Carolyn through that. We hosted together 2 years ago a barrel decorating contest, which was really successful, and we have some really pretty trash barrels now in town. And through that, I continued to volunteer with Carolyn at different events. And I am just interested in keeping this is a beautiful town. It's a beautiful place to visit, and keeping it nice and attracting people to come and visit with us.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Jonathan Jackson Coe. Jonathan Jackson Coe. Jonathan has done lifelong photography and comes from a family of artists and educators, formerly a retail expert with 46 years of experience in all areas of retail with a major national retailer, retired 3 years ago. He's currently engaged in the production of a pictorial essay, which is a coffee table book, with Robert Buddy Wooster on the history of Easton, or A Beautiful Image of Historic Easton. So that was just a little bit about him. Next is Jonathan Blake.
I think he's recording upstairs.
Oh, Jonathan is, might be behind the camera right now. He works with ECAT, and let me see. He's lived here all his life, and he's always been interested in the history of the town and actively works to support the unique community here in Easton and wants to help wherever possible. Next is Joan Lundgren.
Hello, I'm Joan Lundgren, 20 Reynolds Street, and I'm here for the position because I've worked with Carolyn for a number of years, love volunteering in town, have hosted or acted in the position of host for a lot of the events, worked with the Legacy Festival, running the information booth, and as a couple of people in the back row said, I talk a lot, know a lot of people in town, but I think it's so worthwhile, particularly in this environment, for the events that Carolyn puts on, so that's it.
Thank you very much, Joan.
Thank you, Joan.
Thanks, Joan.
And Jason Daniels, he is not here either. Jason is the executive director of ECAT, the Easton Cable Studio, and he has served on the West Bridgewater Cable Advisory Board, worked with this cultural district since its inception, and been involved with many organizations and groups in Easton. ECAT works with technology and media to support creativity and free expression. Inez Smers. Inez is not here. Inez has been a member for a long time. She's an active artist, a member of ESTCD Art Gallery and Co-op, and Inez's work can be found throughout town. Frank Smith Jr. I saw Frank here earlier. There he is. Come on up.
I know a few of you folks. My name is officially Francis B. Smith Jr., and I've always avoided the Francis because I go by Frank. But I have been a resident of Easton for about 36 years now. I have enjoyed it tremendously. I have volunteered for many positions in the town. I've been on the Cultural Council when it first started, and I was asked to leave because I was too old. No. I'd been there long enough, so now I think I've left long enough that I can get back on it again. That whenever Carolyn has had something, I have been more than happy to volunteer and have called her in advance to tell her that I would really enjoy being part of it. The legacy, the art show, everything that she has, that she's involved in. I am, as I said, I am firmly committed to Easton. I've been here for about 36 years. Probably will be leaving for a couple of months and then coming back because I've lost my lease. And, but I'll be definitely making it. I have made a commitment to come back, and that's why I'm leaving, so I can come back. But I have always been very creative, had a lot of ideas about various things. I believe in synergy, that people work together, that working together they become more powerful entity than working as individuals. And I'm firmly committed to that, and I have no shame in any of the ideas that I come out with, as bad as they might be, or as good as they might be. So I would just, I think I could lend something to the cultural district, and I would be more than happy to be part of it.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you, Frank.
And we also have Rosa Galino, and Rosa is not here tonight either. She's an original team member in developing and running events for the Easton Shoveltown Cultural District. She has degrees in art design, experience as a chef, running events, teaching food classes. She's the owner and manager of the Fieldhouse Arena, working with children and adults and developing skills related to leadership, fitness, etc. As the owner and manager of the Fieldhouse Arena, creating fundraisers and private party events, the cultural district liaison in the teaching of classes for food sustainability, including canning and food preparation with the Grange, the Ames Free Library, the Foodie Group, the district, etc. So as you can see, we have 11 applicants, including Carolyn, and we have 9 positions, because apparently no one can say no to Carolyn when she's looking for help with the district. So what I would recommend that we do is, it's not on our agenda, but what I'd like to do is on the next agenda, if it's okay with the board, maybe consider making this an 11-member board. And if we agree, if you are in agreement with doing that, then we'll put off the voting on this until we vote to change the makeup of the board, and then we'll vote the people at our next meeting, if that's okay with everyone. Because this is a really good group. I think I know just about everybody personally, and I know the work that they've done and really rolled up their sleeves. So if that, is that okay with you, Carolyn? Do you think that's good?
Wonderful, because I hate to lose anybody that's so committed, and
Right.
they all are. And also, you know, with time, people's lives change, some will move off the board and go into the advisory board, and
Sure.
vice versa. So there's always movement.
Okay, great.
One of the great things about this town is the number of people who volunteer for committees and boards, et cetera. And I think you're a big draw for that too, Carol.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So
I
we
agree.
have
It's a great
consensus
approach.
on moving this.
Absolutely.
Sure, so the board will table it tonight. We'll put a revision to the charge, as well as an appointment of all the 11 who've applied on for your next meeting on April 29th.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Okay,
Great.
and do we have to appoint the ex officio selectmen on that, or?
It is a town rep. It does not need to be a member of the board, but yes, you would vote to make that appointment. I would, for cleanliness of the minutes,
Do that
I would
next
just do
time
all
also.
of it at once.
Okay.
One time, yeah, okay.
All right, great. Thank you very much, and thank
Thank you.
you,
Thank you
everybody,
all
for
for
coming
applying.
tonight.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Have a great night. Thanks, Carolyn. It's a great idea.
Thinking on the fly, Tom.
Great idea.
We have a reappointment of a member of the Board of Registrars.
Yes, in your packet, there's a letter from the Easton Democratic Town Committee requesting a reappointment of Barbara Crowley as a member of the Board of Registrars with an expiration date for March 31st, 2022.
Okay. And Craig is the chair of the Democratic Town Committee, which has nothing to do with the Board of Selectmen, just to make that clear,
That's right.
because it's a little confusing if you're looking in the packet and you see the letter coming from Craig. That's not coming from him in his role as a select board member. It's as chair of the Democratic Town Committee.
And I will recuse myself since I made the nomination.
Right. So do we just make a vote to accept this,
I would recommend the board
or
appoint
make it as an appointment?
Barbara as a roll call appointment.
Okay. So would somebody like to make a motion and a second, and then a roll call vote to appoint Barbara?
So move.
Second?
So that's Chuck and Tom, and then roll call vote.
King, Metellus Crowley.
Broussard, Crowley.
Full Janetti, Metellus, Crowley,
Rose, Crowley.
and Craig recuses. So Ms. Metellus Crowley is appointed. The next is the determination by the Board of Selectmen as the appointing authority on financial interest of disclosure.
Sure, so attached in your packet, you'll find a standard disclosure form that was submitted by a member of the Conservation Commission. It's a conflict of interest disclosure form that is required when a municipal official has certain interests in a matter that is before them in their official capacity, but feels that the interest is not so substantial as to interfere with their ability to participate. In this instance, the commissioner has a family member employed by an applicant that's before the Conservation Commission. However, the pending hearing for that applicant is not directly related to that employment by a family member, and a decision by the Conservation Commission won't impact the employment one way or another, and according to the commissioner, would not compromise his independence. The form and the facts associated with it have been reviewed by town council, who've said that it's appropriate, and the facts as they've been reported could reasonably support a conclusion by the board, if you're willing, that the indirect financial interest of a family member's employment in this instance is not so substantial as to be deemed likely to affect the integrity of that commissioner's ability to participate in that hearing. Accordingly, if you wish, you may vote to determine as much and accept this disclosure and allow the commissioner to participate. Alternatively, if you do not wish to do that, the commissioner would recuse himself. So this is a standard form. This is the appropriate filing with you as the commissioner's appointing authority.
What are your thoughts on this?
I see no reason why he should not be allowed to continue. It's his daughter, and it's a part-time job?
It's a part-time position with a camp that's, I believe, has a notice of intent with the Conservation Commission, and the commissioner has indicated that there's no overlap. It's not as if a beneficial or any decision from the commission will have a direct impact on that employment.
Sure.
I would agree as well.
I don't think it's a big deal.
Okay. Would somebody, well, how would we phrase this motion, Connor?
I would recommend a motion to issue the determination as presented in the disclosure form in your packet, which is a determination that the board has reviewed this form and the matter and determined that the financial interest is not so substantial as to be deemed likely to affect the integrity of the services which the municipality would expect from the employee, in this case the commissioner.
So that's awful long, so we take a motion to issue a determination as presented in the disclosure form in the packet.
That is
So
sufficient.
moved.
I have a quick question. I don't have a problem with it. How does it work if an applicant applies and they don't get the answer they want or the determination they want, and they turn around and they file some sort of an appeal? Couldn't that be used as a tool for the appeal? I know you're not an attorney, but just out of curiosity.
Well, any applicant before any board who feels that adverse action was taken against them could always file an appeal of that decision. In this case, if a person is just seeking to be able to participate.
Well, not necessarily maybe not that necessarily the applicant, but maybe like a neighbor and a butter. I don't have a problem with it. I'm just out of thinking about it a little bit. I'll vote for it.
Well, I don't know the exact circumstances. I don't want to put the planning director on the spot, but you did used to serve the Conservation Commission. Could you, for a notice of intent, would such an appeal by a butter be a relevant factor, do you think?
I mean, anyone could, if they're in their appeal, claim that there was bias on part of the commission, a member of the commission, but they'd have to demonstrate what that bias was and how it affected the decision. So, the fact that maybe the commission found that the project didn't meet the performance standards, it would be kind of hard to make a case that it was because of, potential conflict of interest.
Yeah, well said.
I was just curious. It just kind of crossed my mind.
And that's a good question, but I think one of the intent of these standard forms is specifically so that this is done transparently and openly. This is a public record. This person is going on the record saying, look, there is something that looks like there could be a conflict, and this is why there is. So I think the intent is to protect against that.
Okay, all right, sounds good.
So you made a motion, Craig, is there a second?
Second?
Seconded, all in favor? Unanimous. Okay, next is the town administrator's preliminary fiscal year 2020 capital budget memorandum.
Sure. So there's a hard copy with each of you. This was also distributed to you on Friday. Finance director and I have compiled the preliminary capital budget for fiscal year 2020. We are still considering this preliminary because we do still have a projected deficit in the operating budget that needs to be resolved, and it could impact the capital budget, as the capital budget relies on available funds and free cash. So I do not have a formal presentation of this. I can just kind of touch through the highlights, Dottie, if you would like.
Sure.
So fiscal year 20 on the capital side, similar to the operating budget, is another challenging year for the town. We are continuing to have difficulties with adequately funding our operational and significant capital needs due to an ongoing structural revenue deficit compounded by limited revenue growth. This results in operating and capital needs competing for the same available funds, particularly one-time money. The capital needs of the town are significant. Our 5-year capital plan, which is attached to this, estimates the total capital needs currently in the area of $79,108,000, of which $3.5 million are requests pertinent to fiscal year 2020. At this time, I'm proposing a partial funding of those capital requests, which is representative of the Capital Planning Committee's prioritization list, as well as certain smaller capital items that fall below a dollar amount threshold where they do not go to the Capital Committee. They are asked directly of me. As I said, however, because there is still a projected deficit in the operating budget, this recommended capital funding list may be reduced. The total proposed capital budget for fiscal 20 is $2,135,166, of which $1.3 million I would recommend be funded from borrowing, $408,000 would be funded from a combination of available funds, and $404,000 would be funded from enterprise surplus. This is not a complete funding of every capital request. That is typically not, in my time that I've been here, I don't think that has ever been done. So we do look to the capital planning bylaw and work with the capital planning committee to have a ranked prioritization of the most critical needs. We'll not read through every single item on that proposed list. Fire and ambulance, we will be looking for funding for life pack monitor and defibrillators for engine 2, as well as replacing all of our fire nozzles, some of which are at least 15 years old and some are 20 to 25 years old. Includes funding for 4 thermal imaging cameras.
I think you should just run through the list, Connor.
Okay.
I think it's important that
Fair
people
enough.
know the kinds of things that are on this.
Sure. Fire, we have thermal imaging cameras, $10,580. Fire protective clothing for turnout gear for the firefighters, $15,000. For fire and ambulance, you have wireless air links for departmental vehicles, an airbag replacement for one of their vehicles. Wendy, would you, if I'm missing something?
I just wanted to mention that the airbag is actually they're air lifting bags
I was
that
gonna
are
say,
used.
that's a lot of money for an airbag.
Right, I know. Yeah, so it's for air lifting bags to use in extrications.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
We have gear washer and dryers for the turnout gear. It's important for those to be able to be decontaminated after being on the scene. And then a small appropriation for the CERT team for tires and modifications to the minibus that we received from Brockton Area Transit for community emergency responses. So that's the fire section. For schools, I am recommending through borrowing the replacement of the RO roof, replacement of the press box lift at Moscato Stadium, which is an ADA requirement that is important to be funded. Recommending the capital portion of the turf at Moscato Stadium, that is $185,000 in borrowing, as well as the computers, school technology, projectors, and network upgrades for the schools. For DPW, the capital needs of DPW are great. I hesitate to even call them the capital needs of a DPW because it is not in a silo. The DPW maintains roads that we all drive on. They plow snow that is in all of our way. And DPW Director Dayfield did a great job kind of rolling his department's capital outlook into the operating budget presentations in late March. So in DPW, we are looking in fiscal 20 to partially fund a DPW environmental health and safety program. That is a request that has been in the capital hopper for a while. I believe the total cost is $100,000. The funding is not there to do all of it, so we're recommending a partial funding of that, as well as select replacements through borrowing of some of the most in-need vehicles from DPW. All those vehicle needs are significant. However, the capacity is not there to borrow the entire cost. DPW Director Dave Field referenced somewhere in the area of 600+ thousand is necessary. 590,000 annual in order to reduce the average age of DPW's aging fleet. The budget recommendation for fiscal 20 for the capital budget is 460. That does not meet that target. We have not met that target. The funding has not been there. So that results in necessarily a fleet that, while we are making critical replacements, we are not replacing everything in need. The Dorr and Whittier evaluation of the town, municipal, and school building facilities, that was prepared, I believe, in 2014. That identified over $20 million in needed renovations and repairs to town buildings. So it does not include school buildings. Some of the most significant needs, and I see a large amount of school committee members in the room, so they will correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the most significant building needs on the school side are for the K-2 schools. Obviously, there is an opportunity on the table for the community through the MSBA project for Easton Early Elementary to ameliorate and completely, effectively delete that very, very, very large backlog, most recently estimated, I believe, at $86 million, just to bring them up to brand new post-World War II era buildings. So this $20 million number doesn't include any of that. This is just the town building needs. And so DPW has been requesting each year a $200,000 borrow for municipal facilities improvements, which we have been funding in some years at the full $200,000, in recent years at $100,000. There is a bit of the authorization from the prior year still available, and due to the funding challenges we're having, I would recommend only funding half of that at $100,000 for DPW to be able to address some higher priority items. DPW's request for roadway paving, we spoke a bit about that with Director Field during the budget presentation. The town receives just shy of, I think, about $500,000 that we can use of Chapter 90 state money for our road repairs. The DPW's estimate is that we would need to spend closer to 3 times that in order to maintain the quality of our roads and start addressing a $19 million backlog of repairs that we need on our roads. I think today I saw an email to the DPW director asking about a status of a road, and that is just not in the next 3-year funding window because of our constraints. So since he's been the director of Public Works, Dave Field has asked and submitted through the capital process a request for a $500,000 local borrow each year to supplement that state money so that they can continue to adequately maintain our roads and, when possible, chip away at that backlog. We have been deferring that borrow until the fall of each year. I'm recommending that again. And as the DPW's 3-year pavement management plan had shown, we are not making an assumption that we will continue to borrow this amount in the year 2 and 3 of the 3-year look forward. As important as it is for us to fund our road repairs, we cannot necessarily borrow $500,000 a year every single year. So that'll be delayed until the fall. The plan is to recommend that with a supplemental capital budget in the fall. Health and Community Services, I'm recommending funding a $50,000 request for purchase and installation of a generator at Frothingham Hall. Frothingham Hall is used for smaller scale shelter operations and acts as a cooling and warming center during major storms and weather extremes. Last year, the town authorized a total of $150,000 in borrowing authorizations for a replacement of generators that I think might have actually been older than me at DPW and Fire. Those were replaced, and thankfully that was actually done at a lower cost than what was authorized. So there's, right before the capital budget on the town meeting warrant, we're looking to rescind some of that debt authorization, which exceeds the cost of Frothingham's generator. I know that wasn't the most succinct summary, but what I'm trying to get at is that funding a borrow for Frothingham's generator, which is another shelter facility in town, can be done within the initial $150,000 borrow that was done for 2. Those 2 were achieved at a lower price. We're going to rescind some of that debt and take up that space with a 3rd generator.
We also got the earmark
Oh,
money.
that's right. We also did receive, thank you to our delegation, a $45,000 earmark in the state budget for 2019 to further offset the cost of those generators. So they came in under budget, and we received some support from our partners of the state. So that is helpful. We'll rescind some of that debt, and I would recommend using some of that purchasing capacity for Frothingham's needed generator. Wendy, I'm going to ask you to speak to the Cemetery Commission request, please.
So the Cemetery Commission is requesting $13,500 to purchase and install a 24-niche columbarium in the Pine Grove Cemetery, which is owned by the town. Their goal is to sell the space in the niches and they estimate that they will generate enough money so that they can then use this to purchase for future columbariums. They estimate that they could make a profit of $17,700, so that would fund another one in the future, and so on and so on.
Do they have a revolving account? Like, how do we?
They don't, but they would be able to establish a revolving account with this money, and a town meeting vote would not be required to do that.
So does anybody else not know what a columbarium
I have
is?
no idea. I was going to ask that question.
Because I just looked it up. So
Yeah.
columbarium is a place for the respectful and usually public storage of cinerary urns. So
Yes, and they estimate that each niche could hold 2 to 3 urns, potentially.
Right, so the last two items quickly, these are enterprise accounts, so these are not funded through general borrows or through free cash. They're funded out of available enterprise. For first is sewer, there is the total cost estimate of $54,000 for the repair of one of the tanks at Northeastern Village's wastewater treatment facility. This is the total cost, which would be the appropriation. However, as we had discussed at the last Board of Selectmen's meeting, or it may have been more than one meeting ago, they all blur at this point, the manufacturer and GC are going to make contributions to offset this, and the net cost will be $22,000. So that'll be funded out of available sewer enterprise funds. And then water is requesting $100,000 out of water enterprise funds available to perform recommended maintenance on the Washington Street water storage tank. And I believe a pilot test treatability study is also needed for a water treatment plant on Red Mill Road for wells 3, 5, and 7 to remove iron and manganese from the raw water, as well as two vehicles totaling $100,000 for the water division. So that will bring you to the estimated preliminary capital budget of just over $2.1 million. Again, from a variety of funds, borrowing, available funds, and enterprise funds available. So this is, again, preliminary because we do still have a operating budget deficit projection that we may need to remove some items from this. I obviously understand the severity of the town's capital needs, but we are keeping those options available until the budget is balanced.
I have a few questions, actually. For the environmental health and safety program, if that's not a physical thing, I thought capital expenses had to be like a tangible physical item. Is a program still considered a capital? How is that considered a capital expense?
I would still consider it a capital expense because it's part of a program that can, there are things that would be in there that would be, physical changes, not just like a consulting study, or even sometimes studies can be considered capital if they lead to capital improvements.
Okay. Will the whole list be available online?
It is. Yes.
Already? I mean, the list of things that we're not
funding the
looking
5-year
at.
plan, yes. So yes, that is included in every budget book we do. I know that it probably gets lost in a 200 or 300 page shuffle, but the capital budget in full, this memo will be put online, but obviously the font ends up being quite small on letter size. So we do include the total 5-year capital needs spreadsheet in our capital budget that is online.
So that's where you find it in the budget.
Yes, you can go and look, and you can see an overlap with quite a few of these requests. In the 2019 budget that is online now, that was adopted by town meeting last May, you do have the capital budget for the town and schools and all of those 5-year requests available. So we do make that publicly available. The capital budget does go through a public process with the capital planning committee, and if you go back and watch those meetings year over year, you'll hear a lot of similar asks because we do frequently defer items, and part of what you'll see on that 5-year capital plan is a year of initial request, and you'll see certain things going back, 2006, 2014, it going back many, many, many years. So we do try, we prioritize things that are generally life-saving, things like generators for emergency operations, defibrillators, things of that nature. Try, to prioritize maintenance of existing assets, but it is a challenge due to the scope of the needs that you see in that 5-year capital plan.
Yeah, I think it's important to flag that because I think people should look at that to realize that, this is the whittled down version of what the real needs are, and it's important to take a look at that. I don't see any police or fire car vehicles on here this time.
That is correct. So I believe, cruisers are requested, but I'm recommending those be deferred to the fall.
They were deferred to the fall. We deferred them last year to this past fall town meeting, so I don't even think we've gotten the bill in yet for those 3 cruisers. So we were able to defer that to the fall, and that's typically an available funds purchase, and it's a sizable amount, so we would wait until free cash was certified.
Okay, and those are on a schedule so that there's a certain amount replaced every year?
There's a yes, there's a
We've been
request.
replacing 3.
We have been replacing 3 annually out of available funds, but those have been being deferred to fall after a free cash certification every year.
So I guess I just would say that it's worth noting that for borrowing in capital improvements, we try to keep the borrowing for that at around 7% of the budget.
The debt service
The debt
specifically.
service.
Yes, yep.
And part of the reason that that's important to have that as part of our financial principles are because the credit agencies look at that to see, are you investing back in your community again? And that's part of what contributes to the high bond rating that we have. So I just thought that was interesting when I learned that.
That's right. We maintained a AA3 rating. Most recently, our debt per capita is modest. We do take a lot of care to make sure that we are living within our means in that area.
A couple things, if I could. So, Connor, speaking of that debt per capita, I believe when we looked at our peer group, the debt per capita was one of the few statistics where we actually seem to be performing. Now, I'll say this because it depends what side of coin you fall on, but we're spending less in terms of debt per capita than our peer groups, if I remember, on average. Whereas in many of the other areas, such as school spending per capita, we were under, and the police, we were under. Is that a fair statement of saying that debt per capita, we seem to be favorable versus our peer group?
I think it depends. It can be heavily influenced, particularly, and Wendy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe outstanding, usually school project debt has a huge impact on that because that is typically the largest investment a community will make in itself is a larger school project. And so we've had some MSBA projects come off the debt ledger recently.
Right.
And I believe the debt outstanding on OA is not very significant at this point.
Between 12 and 13,000.
Okay.
So
it would be
13
helpful, I
million,
think,
sorry.
to understand that. If we are indeed favorable from a debt standpoint, and there are things like the DPW presentation that says because of our aging fleet, we're incurring more operating costs.
Right.
And given the cost of capital at this point in time, then that might be an opportunity for us to lean in a little bit in terms of debt service so that we, in net, pay a little bit more in interest, but it helps us on an operating expense perspective. So I would just, I guess, consider that, and maybe I can offline wrap my head around exactly the point you brought up. But I remember distinctly that debt service was something that was a little bit more in our favor versus a lot of the other categories. I'd also like to point out that on these pages there are, and if I did my math very quickly, so I apologize, head down, 123 items that are associated with the 3 elementary schools, and I think that references the $86 million that you spoke of earlier.
Yes.
I just want the audience and everybody here to appreciate that's 3.5 pages of this 7-page document. That is such a huge opportunity for this town in terms of this specific capital planning list that stands before us. And so I just want to point that out, emphasize that, and they're not 123 small items if they add up to 86 million, and probably more if you consider programming that also has to get layered in on those.
Right.
I would ask, and I guess on the heels of the first comment regarding our debt, if there is an opportunity to consider things like some of the equipment for the DPW. And I know it's always easy to say to add a couple more littler things or smaller things, but they add up. It looks like we're at $2.1 million this year, and we've averaged $1.7 million over the last 2 years, with FY18 much higher due to $3.7 million of water main replacement, which
right.
comes out of a different
Comes
place.
out of enterprise,
So
and I think Dave
remove
did
that enterprise, it's
yeah.
1.7.
Okay.
So it looks like 18's 1.7, 19's 1.7. We have accelerated to 2.1, I think with a lot of worthy items that all should be funded. So in addition to the DPW vehicles, I would also consider perhaps some of the, having watched the capital planning meeting presentations on ECAT, if we might also consider addressing one of the battery backups at the schools, given there's 2 of them at equal amounts, and try and break that up and take digestible items. But those would just be the things that I quickly noticed. I couldn't find the spending levels for 17 and 16 conveniently, but I did find 15, which is 2.8 million of spend. So the interplay between how we take our capital budget and satisfy it, I know you do it very well, your team does it very well, of balancing how to leverage this, also having those operational expense impacts, I think are helpful, and I would, maybe if we could lean in here perhaps in some of those areas, it might help out a little bit further down the road in some cases. But that was all I saw from reading through the capital plan.
Anybody else? Anything public? All right, great. That was very good.
Thank you, Connor, well done.
You're very well done, team.
Okay, next up is the annual warrant.
Sure, so there is the most recent draft of the annual town meeting warrant, both in your packet, there's a hard copy available, there's a copy available online for public consumption, as well as in the town hall lobby. We have a good roster of articles before us tonight, the first of which, there is a placeholder in your warrant, Article 12, which is the approval of a tax agreement. And because there is a placeholder, we do have Chief Assessor here to speak to that and provide some detail.
Good evening, everyone. This placeholder is for Eastman Street Solar. It is a solar being done at 35 Eastman Street. They called asking for a pilot because solar has been very up and down. As far as the legislation, there hasn't been clear legislation, so basically it's been through court cases. Of course, the last one, which I told Connor about, was basically taxable entities were found to be, as far as solar, they meet the exemption. They would meet the exemption for taxation. Exempt properties would not meet the exemption for solar. That's why last year or 2 years ago, we did, 2 years ago?
2 years ago,
We
had
did the
pilot with
Stonehill.
SunPower at Stonehill.
So we've been working on this, and actually at 6:28 tonight, I received an email that the numbers we've been working with, they've agreed to.
Now, Rob, before we get into the good news, which I anticipate is good news, or else it wouldn't be a surprise, is just for folks at home, solar, to your point, the law on the taxation of solar panels as commercial property is not very clear in Massachusetts, right? And so
Correct.
that is why the
Correct.
developers of solar often do reach out to the assessors or folks in a community and try to come to basically an agreement on a tax payment schedule, because there is that uncertainty, and this is beneficial for
Right.
for
There's
both.
been legislation at the State House that the MAO, Massachusetts Assessors, and the MMA have been working on, I believe, together. Last year, we thought we were going to get it. We were this close, and the last minute, it got knocked down. We're hoping this session it will pass, so that we'll have clear indication of what's taxable, what's not taxable. But the recommendation right now is definitely to go with pilots. I think these people are, they called to do the pilot simply because they don't want to find out. They want to know what their spending's going to be. So basically, there's a firm that comes in, they build it, they do the package, and then they sell it to someone else. So they need to know what their expenditures are going to be. The pilot is the best thing because then they know this is what they're paying over the 20 years of the solar. The next phase, of course, solar is starting to go longer. So probably in 20 years, I won't be here. Connor may be. But it may be either negotiating more on this project as well as the other projects, or there could be a total different way of doing taxation at that time for the solar projects.
So one of the benefits here is that establishing a pilot provides clarity where there currently is none.
Right. With the pilot, it basically locks us in. We know what we're getting, they know what they're getting, and there's no change. No matter what happens, even with new legislation, all pilots basically that have been negotiated and signed and agreed to will stay. They're not going to change.
So when you say pilot, I just want to clarify that for people at home that might not know what that stands for, payment in lieu of
taxes, yes.
And an important point here, and this I'm trying to remember back 2 years ago, but one of the important things with a pilot is, depending on how it's structured, if it could survive a legislative change, you could not only have that certainty, but you could have an agreement where if in 3 years there's reform to how something is taxable, and the reform says panels are not, and you have the pilot, you then get 17 years of payments on something that would have been none.
Exactly. Exactly.
So are you asking us to?
Well, I think Rob was going to give some numbers. I would ask for an inclusion of the article tonight because we are just getting the numbers right now. I would not ask you to make a recommendation just yet, but we can talk through the numbers tonight. And then you have another 2 meetings, I think, 1 or 2 meetings where you can continue to make recommendations. But this is not your last night to do so. So I would ask that there would be an inclusion of the warrant article tonight.
Where's 35 Eastman Street, if I may ask?
That's Sunco, just past Avalon and that.
Right, okay.
So close to the Mansfield line. And they actually, from my understanding, I drove out there. I didn't see it yet. I drove out when they were first starting. Originally, they were looking at the roof, but with this one here, they're actually doing a side. So they're doing the side of the building because I think the roof just didn't qualify or I didn't give them enough. They've got to do so much in order to make the program feasible for them. So.
If it's on the side, it's affixed to the building.
It is fixed,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, it's, right. So the first year, we're looking at the taxes to be $42,542.98. Which would be definite growth. This would not start till fiscal year 2021. And basically that's because they did not have it hooked up and operational by January 1st of this year. So they'll have it operational probably midsummer, if not sooner. So January 1st, 2020, it'll be operational taxation for fiscal year 2021.
And Rob, when you say taxation for 21, you mean that this is basically would be a guaranteed 42,000 number to add to new growth?
Right.
Which would permanently add to the levy.
So we know we're getting at least 42,000 in fiscal year 2021. That I can confirm right now once they sign it. They always ask me, and it's hard to do new growth because you never know. We have a good spring. You could get a lot more building. We have a bad spring or a bad winter. It holds everything up. So everything has to be done by June 30th. So it's hard to give a growth number in January when you still have basically 6 months or 5.5 months to go. So you just try to rely on the average. The total over the 20 years would be a total of just under $330,000. And the value would be $2,665,600 to start, and it would decrease from there.
So to be clear, though, that first year is representative of full freight of what our tax rate is, right? So that's something that's important. We do with the last. This is basically the sum power. This is the model that we used of the last tax agreement that was adopted by town meeting.
Right. It was adjusted a little bit. We moved the depreciation around because that's something that's been changing. So that did change a little bit. The depreciation was a little better for us actually. As they continue to go and they're making the the solar panels, they're getting better, they're getting thinner, they're costing less, so they're worth more.
Rob, projects like this, does it require the building of an infrastructure to handle that backflow of energy into the grid?
With the SMART program, which is the new program from the state, they are now able to have batteries, which will store the power. This project, from what I've been told, and I got it in an email, and I've saved it, so they're not using batteries. In the future, when they do, the batteries bring in even more value, is my understanding. We have trainings on solar probably 3 or 4 times a year. Through the Mass Association and the county associations. And it's still changing.
How does it normally work? Is it Sunco who brought this up and identified this and found a partner, or is it the partner who says, there's a good...
At this point, it's probably a mixture.
Yep.
I think everyone, if we can save on our electric, and even get away from gas or oil or anything by using the sun, I think we're all trying to save money, so we're all looking at it. I think the beginning, the solar companies were looking, and I think now it's a mix.
The only reason I bring that up is there's a lot of square footage as I look at the aerial view over, obviously, the Big Y and that complex as well. And if there was somebody who was looking and doing a project and there was such close proximity, just never know if there's some economic development that could happen by putting 2 people together. Target already has some solar panels, it looks like. But again, just a thought, i.e. where you're going to put a main trunk line in to feed a lot of energy, and you could go a little bit to the right and a little bit to the left, maybe there's merit in just saying.
Well, this is the 3rd program the state has brought forth. The first program, they expected, I think, 2 years to build out. I think they were built out in 6 months, at least with projects that were in the program. You know, not necessarily built, but they were going to be built. So this is the 3rd go around at the solar. The one thing they've done with this program also, they've made it so that in some towns they took a whole bunch of forest land or open space and they cut everything down and put the solar fields in. You can't do that anymore. So that's one good thing, especially for the communities out west. So that's some of the changes that's been happening.
So would somebody like to make a motion to include?
So moved.
Second.
Tom and Chuck, all in favor? Unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
So Dottie, the next article is Article 15. Again, the warrant has a placeholder, so I would just ask for the board consider just an inclusion of the warrant article as the capital budget is presented. Not seeking a recommendation necessarily at this time because it is preliminary.
Okay, somebody like to make a motion to include?
So moved.
Second.
Craig and Tom, all in favor? Unanimous.
Okay.
So next is Article 22, the report and fiscal year 2020 budget of the Community Preservation Committee.
We don't have a slide for the budget, but we do for the rest, so if you just let me. Jim can go over the budget.
Evening. I'm Jim Lee. I'm the chair of the Community Preservation Committee. All right, the 2020 budget appropriations, the administrative expenses, 74,000.
Stephanie, I'm sorry, do you have hard copies of this?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Continuing, we have debt service of $512,063. The reserves into community housing, $31,905. and the annual budgeted reserve is 596,187. So that would be Article 22 in the warrant.
Jim, for the people at home, can you just delineate the debt service and the community housing and the annual budget reserve so people can understand what that is?
All right. I can go back one step further. I can tell you the estimated income into community preservation funds from the surcharge is 1.25 million this year, with an estimated state match, I believe about 18% is of 235,000.
I got a quick question for you.
Yes.
How for the state matching funds, how as more and more towns and communities are taking advantage of getting involved in the CPA, how is that looking overall? Is that starting, are the funds starting to dry up, or is there a maintaining, or?
They are decreasing. The state match is decreasing initially in 2001 when we first joined this program. The state match was 100%, which is not bad return on your investment as a community. Even 18% is not bad. The larger cities have joined, and so that match will be decreasing. And again, we just have to plan for that. That's just the reality of it.
At the same time, there is legislation being proposed to increase the amount being collected at the registries when there are sale transactions.
To supplement the revenue to the
supplement,
state's budget,
right.
so that they can continue
Right.
the state match.
And fund it.
Right,
There's-
so to be clear, so that's a good question, that when CPA, or I think we're gonna talk a little bit about the background of CPA
Right.
for folks at home, but so when CPA was first adopted, the state used to match a significantly higher portion
Right.
of that funding.
And the 100% that Jim references, I believe is because Easton committed to the full 3% assessment, you could have committed to a lower, like the 1.5, but you received a higher percentage of the state match if you were at the 3%. So if you weren't a 3% community, you weren't getting 100% match.
I think we were one of the first towns to
Yes.
take advantage of this as well.
Yes.
We shouldn't have told everybody else how great it was.
I think other people were figuring it out.
And so again, in background, the official uses of these, the only allowable uses are for open space acquisition and recreation, historical preservation, and affordable housing. Each of those three areas has a commission or a committee that makes recommendations as to the appropriateness of grants that have been requested through this process. And pretty much they act as a liaison in that development of proposals to us. Our role is to make sure that the proposals are appropriate given the legislation, and then to make decisions to bring to town meeting, either recommending or not recommending certain projects. So we have a number of projects this year, and they follow in the warrant articles.
Yeah. I think it's important to note, too, that Jim mentioned there are three primary areas, the three areas for which you can expend these funds: open space and outdoor recreation, historic preservation, affordable housing. We have committees or boards, the Recreation Commission, the Historical Commission, as well as an Affordable Housing Trust that weigh in on those different projects when they're presented. But the board composition itself is important to note because you have representation from each of those boards. You have a representative from the Housing Authority. You have representation that's mandated. These are mandated representations from the Planning and Zoning Board. And then you have two at-large positions. So this is really supposed to be representative of the community and the community making their own decisions on how this money is being spent.
And the last factor I want to mention is that the legislation requires that 10% of the funds be held for each of those three specific items. So in other words, this year we have the estimated budget of 1.485 million. So 148,000 then would be designated, set aside for affordable housing, for open space acquisition, and for the historic preservation. And that's the only use those funds can be used for. If they're not used in a particular year, then they're held in a separate escrow account.
So 148,000 for each of those categories,
That's
not
right.
divided? Okay.
That's right, for each of those categories. Yes.
Quick question. On the Smith Farm, obviously it's historic preservation. How does that work? 'Cause that's state property. How
Well, David, before you do that, let's.
all right, I don't want to, I
go
was,
in
all
order
right,
so
fair
we
enough,
can
fair
hit it
enough.
when
All
we
right,
get
I didn't know if this was just we were going to get that out.
Well, I think last year when we had town meeting, I think people were a little bit, and this comes up every year because people, it's not, something that people know automatically what CPA funds are for. And people, say, well, if we're trying to hire more teachers or more police or fire, why are we spending money on, a ball field? And that's because you can't use CPA funds only for those three uses. So they can't go for general operating funds. And I think it's really important to say that every time that we talk about this so that people they are aware of it. And at your town meeting presentation, you'll do this little, primer before we start, right? So that people will know that.
And again, along those lines, Dottie, I think it's important to note that these projects and these areas of focus are really important to communities. They define the character of the community. They ensure that there are recreation areas for people. It helps with affordable housing. And yet, if you're looking at the budget, and when you think about the cost to the community at large for these monies, these funds, to be able to fund these projects, it's actually pretty small. But if you're looking at a budget and you are trying to balance schools versus, a new playground like Alley's Park, which was actually constructed with a lot of volunteer work as well. You get a lot of community support behind some of these projects. They would fall to the bottom. So this is a way to make sure that these important, very important features and benefits are provided to the community.
Great. Are you ready to go into the line items, or did you have more on your?
Would the board like to include and recommend just the general, the Article 22, that's the standard template CPA budget that has to be presented in every warrant every year?
So include and recommend that?
Recommend that, yes.
I make a motion to include and recommend Article 22.
Thank you.
So Tom and Craig, all in favor? Unanimous.
And so now we'll go through each of the requests that have been brought forward.
I guess before we do that, I think it's just worth noting that you can go on the Community Preservation Coalition page, and you can see all the CPA projects for every place in the state. So you can look at Easton's whole history, but you can also compare it and see what other communities are doing.
Right.
All right, Article 23, the Affordable Housing Trust Fiscal Year 20 programs.
So-
You want me to talk to this one?
Certainly, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'd love to talk to this one because everyone who has been watching the Affordable Housing Trust and paying attention to Easton's efforts to make affordable housing available knows that it's been very difficult to get these projects going. There are a lot of hurdles that we have to overcome. There are DHCD requirements that you have to meet, and it's not an easy process. And we've had a number of items on the Trust's agenda for a while. This past year, and we're coming up almost all three of these items that are listed here are all coming to closure. And so we're very proud of that, and I know that the trust is as well, and very happy. So 300 Foundry Street, we are close to finalizing the memorandum of understanding with the folks that are going to construct a group home for individuals with acquired brain injury. On Eisenhower Drive, the trust purchased a home at a discount price, and they've been doing some rehabilitation work on that, and that just went on the market for sale as an affordable, deed-restricted home. And then Electric Avenue is the second home that the trust has put out for bid, and Habitat for Humanity is going to construct. The town is also, the trust is also planning on matching funds to help rebuild or relocate the Housing Authority home that's located on Pequannock Avenue. So this year, again, they're asking for $200,000 to continue the funding for that program.
You know, I just wanted to say I was the representative on that board, and you know, I just wanted to thank all the people that I served with. They really put their heart and soul into it, and that goes for Stephanie and Wayne, who put a lot of time and effort into trying to make these projects work. And she's correct; it's a lot of hurdles. So the fact that we actually reached the end on some of these projects is just it's great. So looking forward to seeing them come to fruition. So it's good.
I think you had a part in that too, Dave.
Yeah, no, it's a team effort. You know, it's no one individual. So it was good. It's good.
Congratulations to the Affordable Housing Trust. Okay.
So, Stephanie, I'm sorry, just so I don't get confused, are there slides for every article?
We do have a slide for every article. So do you want us to go through all the articles before the board takes any action? Or?
Lottie, how would you like, do you want to do one at a time? Do you want to do?
I think it'd be cleaner just to do it one at a time.
Sure.
So this, do you have a specific slide for this one, or do you want us to?
This is it.
Oh, this is it, okay. So, a motion to include and recommend Article 23?
So moved.
Second?
That was Craig and David?
Craig and David, all in favor? Unanimous. Okay, Article 24, CPA funding for the Easton Conservation Commission Tufts Farm Assessment and Plan.
Our article numbers are off. I apologize. I didn't realize that.
Okay.
Well,
The slide's not moving though.
the article numbers will fluctuate as we go through this sometimes, so we always ask people not to commit to those numbers to memory.
I'm sorry. I was working with this earlier today, and
You want to do it without the slides?
I think we need to. While Jim talks about
Okay.
this one, we have it in front of us.
All right. So this is 25, that's the Affordable Housing Trust, we just did that.
There we go.
Okay, test form is on this list is the next one. This would be 24.
Right.
Yes.
Sorry, subtract 2 from all of yours.
Yes, we will do that.
Okay. All right, so this is a planning grant, and the idea is to get a specific comprehensive plan for what needs to be done with this historic structure. And this also includes work with some volunteer work and some lower cost help through an educational organization.
So I'll provide a little bit of background. Tufts Farm is a conservation property that's owned and managed by the town under the auspices of the Conservation Commission. It is the only conservation property that has a structure on it, and it's a house. It's been under lease for 7 years, I believe. The Luke family is renting it out. They run it as a family farm, there are outbuildings on the property, and the idea is some of the outbuildings need rehabilitation, they need to be restored so that they can be properly used. And the idea here is to put together a master plan on the best use for those structures and how to incorporate the public into this family farm operation and integrate the whole property better into the broader, I think it's Flyaway Pond Conservation Area. So, and Jim referenced the Conservation Commission, the $7,800 is a discounted price to have the Conway School, who does this type of work, come in and help work with the Conservation Commission to come up with that plan.
And they have animals, do they still have the mules there?
I don't think they have the mule any longer. They have goats and chickens.
Or try and fix it. There you go.
Thank you.
One more
It's
slide.
not advancing.
Maybe your touch screen might not be working.
I'm sorry.
Not at all.
I did test this out earlier today.
Yes. Yeah, better living through technology.
Yep, that's it. Mike?
You might want to just sit there. Your finger apparently works.
All right, anybody have any questions on this one for Tufts Farm?
I do not.
Somebody like to make a motion to include and recommend Article 24?
So moved. Second?
That's Craig and Chuck, all in favor? Unanimous. Okay, Article 25, the Easton Housing Authority Elise Circle roof replacement.
Right. This facility obviously needs a roof replacement, and we do this in the spirit of maintaining the affordable housing, protecting the community members that are part of that. And we've done a similar thing in other housing systems. We've replaced envelope protection items such as roofs and windows. So this is just necessary expenditure.
So just for folks at home, the Housing Authority is run and managed by the state, not the town. And although the people that live there are our seniors and vulnerable population, those units do count towards our subsidized housing inventory. That said, the state should be funding a lot of the work that happens at these facilities, and they don't. We can't let the facilities fall apart, and if the roofs are not well maintained, then that leads to other problems that the state also would not be paying for, and we can't have our seniors living in those conditions. So I know that question will come up, and I just wanted to put that out there, that it is important that we take care of the roofs so that we don't have further damage.
If the state's supposed to be taking care of it, Dottie, is there an opportunity to apply for reimbursement regardless of how small a chance that might be of getting reimbursed at some point?
Nope.
Yeah, that is the short answer, and it comes through the Housing Authority. They apply for funding to get, and I think this year they said they actually received funding for, was it sidewalks?
That's right.
And that's all they could use it for. They couldn't use the money for the roofs.
I know
So
we
the
have
state has
reached,
cut back significantly.
and we have reached out to our delegation to point out, Representative Cronin was at the Housing Authority, and there were a number of folks there talking about some of the needs. And so I know that she's aware of that. I don't know what
It's a
impact it has.
statewide
but-
problem, so it's not just an Easton problem, but it's frustrating. And, you know, other communities are struggling with this as well. I think Brockton has over 12,000 units of housing for their seniors, so imagine what that's like to keep up with without the state funding, so.
I think it's a good use of CPA funds, but how does it work? And that would go for Smith Farm also. How does that work? Because usually they're pretty strict on requiring some sort of deed restriction or something. How does that work with something like this and with like
Well,
Smith
Dottie
Farm?
answered the question, that this counts towards the subsidized housing index.
Right, but is
So
there-
that's,
Right, no, I understood that, but does the state give you, obviously it's not going to turn into anything other than what it is, but are they giving some sort of a deed restriction? And more importantly, the question was more for, I know we're batting out of order a little bit, but it's the same question for Smith Farm. How does that work? And I don't have a problem. I think it's a perfect use for historic preservation funds, but I'm just kind of curious how that works. And I know it can only be exterior, but I'm just curious. I know this was attempted a long time ago, and it kind of got passed over. I'm just wondering if.
Is your question about whether or not, because CPA funds are being used for this, that there has to be some sort of affordability restriction on the property?
Or some sort of a historic preservation restriction or something in the deed? Are they granting that?
this wouldn't be a historic preservation restriction, and we'll get to Smith Farm.
All right, it was more for Smith Farm,
Right.
but yeah, I follow.
But on this, it would count under the housing provision,
Right.
correct? Because these are affordable restricted
Right.
units. So I would think that would satisfy that requirement, at least in this narrow example. I don't know
Right.
about Smith Farm.
And I know in the past we've done siding, and I think it's a good use of the money. I'm just wondering if the state is allowing some sort of not that it's ever going to be anything other than what it is, but I was just curious if there were deed restrictions required or given or anything like that.
It's not called a deed restriction on those, but there are income qualifications for all of those units, so it's essentially deed restricted. The state, you can't go in there and just.
Well, yeah, no, I know how
Yeah,
that.
I understand David's question, and that has not come up in
No,
the
for like
process
Eisenhower.
of reviewing
Eisenhower,
these.
there's a.
There will be a deed restriction.
Yeah,
And,
okay.
correct.
Okay.
And on the 300 Foundry Street, there will be an affordability deed restriction. We don't have that clout on these units.
Right.
It is an eligible expense, and, the coalition has weighed in on that and made that determination as well.
That was what I was getting at. I was just wondering if there was a
Yeah.
determination made. And I'll circle back so we're not batting out of order on
Right.
Smith Farm, but yeah. All right, thank you.
All right, would somebody like to make a motion to include and recommend Article 25?
So moved.
Second.
Craig and Tom, all in favor? Unanimous. Okay, Article 26, the Moscato Stadium turf and track resurfacing.
The Easton Schools came to us with this request, and we are not authorized to pay anything for the cover, the actual turf cover itself. That is excluded in the legislation. But the engineering and the underlayment parts are eligible. And so this is an eligible project. The committee wasn't necessarily pleased with the request because I think when the turf fields came forward to town meeting for installation, there was an assurance that there would be a cash flow maintained to replace these items at the end of their useful life. That wasn't the case. And so the committee looked at this as a public safety issue, that this is a heavily used facility. It's very important to the school children and the community surrounding this field. And so we are recommending it for funding at this level. This is a request, and this is what was funded. There's some concern about issues relating to the materials themselves and all. The committee is putting forward the funding request, and that's to be dealt with by the school.
So this is not the materials, this is
Th-
just
This
engineering
is,
and the under.
this is funding for that material, but there's no specification within our funding recommendation to the town as to exactly what that is. It's an amount of money that has been requested, and we're supporting it.
So it's used for the engineering and what else?
The underlayment
Underlayment.
of the field.
Not the cover, which is specifically excluded.
This was the,
CPA.
sorry, Jim, this was the amount that was requested?
Yes.
Is there an amount that was above this that you're aware of that we still could have funded? In other words, was there more engineering
No,
or more
the
underlayment?
rest of, we had an engineering proposal that we funded last year that did the planning for this. There is other monies involved, but they are to be fundraised.
Jim, if the board had maybe some displeasures or discomfort, is there some sort of a concern that Town Hall may not vote for this? And then the question is if Town Hall, or Town Meeting rather, rejects it, does that put this project in jeopardy?
I think that's not the concern. The concern is, my concern is that there be planning done now, because this has a finite life, to have cash flow somehow to replace it at the end of that life.
I don't disagree with you. I just want to make sure. I mean, it would be lousy if there was a hazard and this were to get rejected, and we would have more problems down the road here.
We have no information about that, no. And the proposal included a presentation to us, and that presentation said that there was no documentation of health hazards or anything else. My statement simply was that we're bringing this forward so that that determination can be made by the school itself.
But I think, David, were you asking about the safety of the field? Does it exist from just a wear and tear and injuries because it needs to be
Well, yeah,
turf needs to be replaced?
This is ultimate, like, to me, this is the ultimate in community. I mean, you have, the kids enjoy it, people come to see it. I just don't want to see if the board has concerns, I would hate to see town meeting not vote for it.
Yeah, I think the board's concerns were, as Jim said, first, that there were members of the board that remember when this was first approved by town meeting, that there was going to be a plan to raise funds for the replacement because it's known they have a 15 to 20 year life. And Bill Matthews is here. I think he can speak to some of this. And there was concern that fundraising didn't occur, that it didn't happen.
So, Jim, I was not at the CPA meeting, but I am correct in my understanding that concern aside, CPA committee did vote to recommend
Oh,
this.
yes.
So I think that's
we're
important
quite
because
concerned.
for
The
folks who are
safety
watching.
issue is that the field is at the end of its safe use life.
It is, right.
And
So
needs to be done.
Because I think that useful life is 10 years, correct? So I just want to be clear for folks at home who are watching, and I think one of the questions was, so there's a variety of different funding mechanisms involved in this. One of them is a capital item, and I'm going to defer to many of the nodding school officials here to probably speak in more detail to this than I can. But so this is a portion of the eligible costs that could be covered by CPA that was recommended in the affirmative by CPA.
Right.
Coach Matthews, do you want to come up and comment on this?
So I appreciate, my name is Bill Matthews, I'm the athletic director at Oliver Ames High School. I think that Stephanie and Jim certainly have communicated the need for the replacement of the turf and the track. I think that kind of gets missed a little bit in the discussion. I suppose I should turn this.
That doesn't amplify, that's just for cable.
Oh, okay. The track and the turf are 10 years old, so they have fully met their expected life. And what happens over that time is on the track, the surface wears off. If we act now, we can resurface the track with a latex surface and the cost is approximately $135,000, which is included in this plan. If we don't act now and we wait too long, the overlayment or the latex layer that they put on top won't adhere to the track. Sharon had that problem a few years ago, and it causes them to have to rip up the entire track at approximately 3 times the cost. From the turf standpoint, the UV rays and the mechanical wear from kids playing on it over time breaks the fibers down to the point where they break off, and they're no longer able to hold the infill, which creates the cushion for the actual turf. So in terms of the process, we selected an engineering firm based on 3 recommendations we got from area schools that have worked with engineering firms replacing turf fields or building turf fields. We interviewed them and selected Activitas as our engineering firm for their reputation, their experience, their integrity, and their knowledge about turf fields. So they've gone forward. The first thing we did, I know that there's some discussion about chrome rubber, and I think, again, Jim and Stephanie clarified that the CPA request doesn't include the cost of the chrome rubber that's being funded separately, but just to have the opportunity to address that. Activitas has dealt extensively with turf fields. And not to take you into the details and get too deep into it, but one of the first things we asked them was, we know there are concerns out there about crumb rubber. Before we make any decisions with a plan, can you please fill us in on what's going on? Now, Activitas is an independent engineering firm. They have no stake in what infill we choose, whether it's organic or crumb rubber. They went through the studies, they provided to us the information and said there is no evidence that there is a link between cancer and crumb rubber. I know that there are some people out there that feel strongly that that's not their opinion, but there are no scientific studies out there that indicate that there's any link. So we made the decision at that point in time, based on the information that we had, to move forward with the crumb rubber infill. We also selected an underpad which attenuates shock. It's kind of a new development in the last few years. And the purpose of including that, which is an additional cost, is to ensure the safety of our athletes because it creates a cushion to help prevent concussions. And then the safety netting, which I think you saw on the slide, yeah. The safety netting is a permanent safety netting so we don't have to put sandbags out there and hope that the wind doesn't blow them down. And it's also quite a project for me, putting those up and taking those down. But the key thing with it is they're permanently put in the ground so that they don't blow over. And that safety netting is the purpose of keeping the lacrosse balls from hitting the track athletes or anybody else that's on the track. So that's the process we went through. In terms of the funding, I came in after the initial field was put in. I wasn't here when that initial funding happened. I know that there's a lot of disagreement about what was or what wasn't promised. I'm not here to represent what happened. I just appreciate the fact, again, that Stephanie and Jim have recognized that we have a need. And as I kind of approach this situation, it's like I just put together a funding program that I felt would get us to the point that we could get the field replaced without having to shut it down. And I tried to minimize the pain on everybody as best I could and reached out to private funding. I tried to minimize the capital requests that we had, try to maximize the private fundraising but still be realistic there, and then bringing money out of the school budget. So I just ask for the support. I do think that we will have community support for it because I think that everybody recognizes what a great asset it is. It's the most used recreational facility we have. So I think when it comes time for town meeting, it is my hope and my belief that we will have support for that. So sorry for the speech, but I feel pretty passionately about this, and I've worked awfully hard at it, and we're getting close to that point of being able to get there. So I'll stop with the speech and open it up, and if anybody has any questions for me.
Well, I think it's really important to hear that, and you know, people hear different messages at different times from different groups, and we can't all watch every single public meeting that's on TV. So if the story is told enough times in enough venues, more people will hear it. So I appreciate you taking the time to come out tonight and to go over that because it is important that we do hear that, you know, again. So
Thank you.
Are there any benefits, out of curiosity, the crumb rubber versus the organic material, that the organic material might last longer, for example, and you have a longer useful life, or any other ancillary? Is there a cost difference between
There's
them?
a significant cost difference, a cost delta to have organic. It's more expensive. And the maintenance on it is significantly higher, a higher cost and a higher amount of labor that's required. You have to top dress it every 2 to 3 years. Talking to an old friend of mine that's up in Andover now, they have an organic field up there. When they have downpours, the cork and coconut washes away. They have to sweep it back from the track onto the field, and ultimately they lose part of it. You do end up with, if you have extended dry periods, you actually have to have an irrigation system for it in order to water it, to keep it moist enough. If you allow it to dry out, and there have been situations where that's happened, that the infill actually will blow away because it gets light and dry and will blow away. So there's a significant cost delta, but I want to stress that we started off first talking about the safety. You know, was crumb rubber considered to be a health risk or not? Because if it was deemed a health risk by the studies, we would have gone a different direction. That was the first thing that we did. And once it was determined from the studies that exist, the scientific evidence that's out there, is that there's no link. There's no established link. People have opinions that there are, and I understand that. I understand the concern. But that, I just want to stress that that's where we started. Is this something we should consider or eliminate and go a different direction? And once we received the information and it was determined that the crumb rubber there was no link, no evidence that it was linked to cancer, that's where we started the plan.
Understood.
So,
If that evidence did come forth over the next 10 years of the useful life of this asset, would it be possible for us to retrofit and remove the crumb rubber and put in the organic materials?
yes. Yes, it can be harvested out of the turf fibers, and it could be replaced if necessary. Yes.
That's good to know.
And what about the option of going with actual grass?
Okay.
And
somewhere in this stack, I have a picture of the old field, Dottie. It was dirt. And, you know, there was a comment at the school committee meeting last week that was a little bit frustrating. There was a comment that the reason that it was dirt was because it wasn't maintained. And I think that's an insult to our DPW. I work very closely with Billy Casey. He does a phenomenal job with our fields and all of the staff with the DPW. The fact is, the amount of traffic that is on that field and the amount of pressure that's put on that field, you're not going to be able to maintain a grass field. So you basically have a dirt field that's not a quality playing surface. And I would say that, in my opinion, that the turf field is significantly safer because when that grass field turns to dirt and then it dries out, it becomes very, very hard. And so I just think from an experience standpoint, I think you know, if you talk to any one of the kids that plays on our fields, you watch them out there, the first place they go to go do a pickup game is to that turf field. They don't go to the grass fields. So I think that turning it back to the grass field does not give us a quality playing surface. It's a dirt field. It doesn't allow us to practice. Like, it's hard to communicate as an athletic director how much usage that turf field gets above and beyond what a grass field would get, because we wouldn't be able to even practice on it. Otherwise, it would be, you know, in even worse condition than it was when we ended up putting the turf in previously. So I think
the
it's
costs for
the cost on it. The estimates are somewhere north of $500,000 just to turn it back to grass, tearing up the stuff that's in there and getting it out of there. Significant expense to turn it back to grass.
Plus maintaining it.
Yeah, and then
And
maintaining
an
it.
irrigation system?
Yep, all the things that would be involved. The number was significantly north of 500,000. I don't know exactly what the number was. Good question.
Any other questions, comments? Well, I think it's indisputable that we need a new field, you know, that we have to do something. And, you know, there are some questions still about the safety of it, and us voting to put this on the town meeting warrant and to recommend it, it doesn't have anything to, it's not about the crumb rubber part of this anyway, But Jackie said that she was open to still talking with people. You know, we want people to, everybody to feel good about this. So I think we should still have the conversations about it. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a town meeting vote. So I think we just need to keep that into perspective too. And that it, you know, people do feel very passionate and very strongly about things. And I think, you know, we'll have the conversations as we go through this. So, Jane?
Just stay right there. So I just have a couple of comments, and this just occurred to me today. And I was around 10 years ago, as were a couple of other people in this room, when the whole fundraising happened for the original turf field. But today I kind of started to shift my thinking about how we fund this. This is an important piece of our district, school district's infrastructure, and we need to think about it like that. And we don't ask any other important infrastructure in town to come up with funding like this. I think we owe a huge debt of thanks to Bill Matthews and to those folks who are doing the private fundraising, and to CPA for stepping up to this. And when we talk about our concern moving forward 10 years from now, we need to shift our mindset about this. You know, we don't ask, I'm sorry, this might not be the best comparison. We don't ask us to do private fundraising to replace fire engines. We don't ask us to do private fundraising to do, you know, pavement management. Those are all important infrastructure components of this community. This field is in that category. And so I think we need to be careful about the expectation that how are we going to fundraise, how are we going to do this 10 years from now? I would hope that sometime over the next 10 years we can start to refocus how we think about this field. It's a piece of infrastructure, and we need to support it as an important piece of infrastructure. And the other thing is, to Dottie's point, we have had 2 school committee meetings now where we have talked about the pros and the cons and really listened to people in terms of their concerns about crumb rubber. We really, I feel like as a school committee, we have devoted 2 very big segments of our meetings to that concern. So while I think it's important to continue to have the conversations, I want to make sure that we don't do this at the exclusion of other important things, because there's a whole lot of important things that we should be talking about. From my perspective right now, the school district budget is high on that list. So, you know, I think we need to continue to be open to it, but I feel like as a school committee we have. So.
Well, about the private fundraising, it's hard to do that when you have, you know, from what I understand, the group that did it, it's great that they did that in the first place, but then people leave, things change. You can't rely on that as a sustainable way. I really have to applaud Fred Murray for stepping up and coming back and wanting to head that up again, because he doesn't even have little kids in the school anymore. So, but that isn't a sustainable way to
we need to
look at that.
rethink how we think about that field. It's an important piece of infrastructure for this community.
Hi, Jackie Wiseman, Palmer Lane, also school committee. I also just wanted to make sure everyone realizes that in these 2 meetings and the discussions we've had over the past year, none of us would have moved forward if we thought for 1 second that there was a health risk for our kids using the crumb rubber. We all, you know, listened to our experts, we listened to activists, we listened to Mr. Matthews and his team, and you know, we've had toxicologists, we've all read the state reports from the various states around the country that have done prolonged studies on this material. And we would have stopped it if we had thought there was a risk. The other thing that Mr. Matthews brought up was the maintenance costs. And I just want to make sure everyone understands that these increased maintenance costs cannot be borne by the school operating budget. It's not an option for us. So we need to think about that as well. Again, we think the crumb rubber does not pose a health risk. The increased maintenance cost is not something we can pay for, and so we need to think about what the life of the field will be if we don't go forward with this project, because as Mr. Matthews said, it has met its useful life. It can still be used currently, but we don't know how long that'll be. And it's determined by objective tests. And so it could be a month, 6 months, a year, we don't know. But once it is not safe to play on, it'll be closed, period. And then at that time, Mr. Matthews and his team is going to have to think about how do we schedule home games, practices, what does that mean? Is that going to be increased cost for the participants because we have to bus them places? These are all things that I just want everyone to be aware of when they're thinking about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
Brian?
Hi, Brian Hoffman, 15 Pine Lane. Full disclosure, I am proud to serve on the steering committee that is working on private funding for the turf and track replacement. And I really value the commentary that I've heard tonight in terms of safety, in terms of the value of this as a part of the school district, as a part of what happens year in and year out as part of the academic athletic experience. But one of the other things that resonates with me, and it's part of the name of the committee that has given us some of this funding, is the word community. And this asset is more than an academic asset. As somebody who goes up and runs around on the track when I'm able to, as somebody who's taken kids, nieces, nephews up onto the ball field when it's not in use by soccer or lacrosse or football. And Bill mentioned, I figure with the figures, at 20,000?
Estimated.
Yeah, estimated 20,000 hours of usage over the last 10 years. That comes out to an awful lot of usage every year, and it's not just football and soccer and lacrosse. It's people in the community, grandparents, parents, children who are not even part of the school system. Yeah, my kids had a great experience at, within the Easton School District. They're well out of that, but this is important to me as a member of the community, and this is not just a scholastic asset, and it's a very important one, but it's a community asset. And I think that, CPC recognized that in, the funding that they took. And I think that hopefully people who are watching tonight's meeting and people will hear about this again and at town meeting will recognize it isn't just about the schools and just about the athletes, it's about the community. So, thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Lori?
Slightly, Lauren Hahn, Wenlock Circle. I was thinking about it in a slightly different way too, because I was doing some research about turf, and Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I had read was basically a natural grass field, 300 to 800 hours of play per year, and a turf field about 3,000 hours play. And then when I was figuring out the number of sports teams we have on it, I actually thought we were using about 1,100 hours per season, so 2,000 hours a year, and that turned out pretty good from what you just said. So when at the school committee meeting, the second one, when we were hearing about when and if the field fails, it's shut down, and Bill was saying that the football team particularly that needs goalposts, they're going to have to beg, borrow, and steal from a community and use buses, but the other teams will be moved to grass. All right, so that's a logistic nightmare for the high school, perhaps, but also the youth soccer programs and the youth lacrosse programs and, the elementary school developing field hockey program. It impacts the whole town. So when we're thinking about that field, I don't think we need to think about just one field. We need to think about the kids second grade and up who are using all our other community fields. And also, weather dependent too. We've had 2 years in a row of indoor tryouts now and snow on the field. And if we were playing on grass, that would be even longer, right? So this has huge ramifications in a New England town with one turf field and a very robust sports program at the high school. How many kids play sports? 600 and something? 600. Yeah, a lot. So I just want to put that out there too. I think it impacts our little guys too, not just our teenagers.
Great point.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Any other comments and questions by the board?
A lot of good discussion.
Thank you, all of you, for coming, because I think it's important to have this conversation. So I appreciate you all coming out tonight. Michelle, did you want to say anything while you were here? All right. Would somebody like to make a motion?
So moved.
Second?
A motion to what?
I make a motion to include and recommend Article 26, CPA funding for the Easton Public Schools Moscato Stadium turf and track resurfacing project.
Second?
All in favor? Unanimous. All right. Next up is the Oaks Ames Memorial Hall Fire Alarm Radio Box.
Right. This item actually came in a year ago, but too late in the process to include with the funding that was going to town meeting for Oaks Ames Hall. So this is kind of a trailer in a sense, and it's a mandated item by the fire marshal. So we agreed to fund it.
This is something that can be covered by CPA. You
Yes.
guys have verified that.
Yes.
That's right.
Anybody have any questions on that?
Make a motion to include Article 27 and recommend for CPA funding for the Oaks Ames Memorial Hall Fire Alarm Radio Box.
Second.
Tom, Craig, include and recommend, all in favor? Unanimous. Now, Smith Farm at Borderland State Park exterior rehab.
This proposal, again, is focused solely on exterior envelope support, protection, I should say, of an historic structure. Yes, the structure exists on state property, but it's within town boundary. So it's an historic asset within the community and therefore eligible for CPA funds, and other similar structures have been funded by other communities. We verified that. So last year we funded the first proposal, and this one reflects the completion of CPA eligible funding.
How much was last year?
I don't recall.
Look that up quick.
Yeah.
Did you want to ask your question, Beth?
We kind of covered it. I mean, overall, I don't like to see money spent on state property, but you know, it is beautiful down there. It's nice to see the building renovated, you know, for the tourists that go through there. So I think it's worthy of spending the money on personally. But other than that, I don't have any other questions. So.
Well, the committee also looks at community impact, and this facility is intended for programming that is quite important to the community, I think. Support of first responders and veterans, disabled individuals. So that is run out of the facility. We can't support anything on the inside. The finishing work and all of that is not to historic standards. This isn't a building that the inside, it's like shovel shop in the sense that the historic structure is maintained and preserved, and it's then made useful for actual activities on the inside.
So when this was first developed by the state, they put out an RFP for curators to come in and look at that property, and the intention was that they were going to be able to live there. Of course, it wasn't livable at the time, but that they would be able to fix it up and live there, and there was a contract period of, I don't know how many years, but it was considerable.
This is not a dwelling. This is a function space.
But wasn't the original intention that the curator would live on site there?
That I don't know.
And that the curator would have the funds, or have the funds available to be able to.
I think the way the state program works is they have these structures on these properties. There are several across the state. And that someone will come in who is going to make useful purpose of the place, whether they live there or they're using it, in this case, for some programming that's available to the public. You know, it's our understanding that the individuals are supposed to come in with their program needs to include, you know, how they're going to accomplish any renovations, restorations, and ongoing maintenance. So we have not seen that plan or agreement with the state. It doesn't preclude them from seeking grants or funding from other sources.
Last year it was 49.5, by the way.
49.5 last year.
Your memory serves you correctly. I mean, they do a lot of functions down there. They are offering a lot of kind of a soul-searching place for veterans, and they do a lot of nice programs down there. I don't know if their original plan of living there has changed. It sounds like it has, but you're right. That was originally what their plan was, so, but I don't, sounds like they're moving in another direction here, so.
And this amount, you said, Jim, would be the amount to finish off the exterior, and that's the end of it? Is that-
That's what they've communicated.
Yes.
When we appropriated the 49.5 last year, did we think that that was the end, or did we anticipate they were going to come back for more?
That wasn't really part of our conversation, I think. They gave us a scope of work, and I believe that scope of work, because of historical restrictions, we had a conversation this morning with the grantees, and they, because of historical standards for materials, some of the materials cost increased over their estimates. And so that's one of the reasons why this proposal's coming forward. It also includes some of the other finishing work on the outside of the building. It was staged. The objective they had with the first proposal was to close the structure in, seal it, protect it from the weather. That was the focus initially, so that it could not deteriorate more.
So where this is a historical building, does this have to be built to historical standards, and is
Anything
somebody
that's funded
monitoring that?
by CPC for historical preservation needs to meet state historical standards for materials and workmanship. Yes.
Right, the Secretary of the Interior Standards.
Okay.
CPA funds can only be used for the exterior, correct? Is that how it works?
They could be used for the interior if it was for historic preservation. In this instance, when they came last year, they did include in their application, their eligibility application, interior work. They were informed that that could not be funded because the interior had been gutted. It needed to be. And there was really, as we understand it, no historical elements of the interior. So that could not be funded. Interior, just to be clear, interior work can be funded. But again, the town also seeks to have an interest. You asked about that earlier. They try to seek a preservation restriction, and that's kind of hard to do on interior at times too.
Right.
And what's the value of the house itself? I guess
The
where
historic value?
I'm kind of going with this is I think it's great. I think it's a great purpose. I support the programming. But to put $70,000 into that in 2 years, when we have so many other priorities like Oaks Ames Hall and some things right in the heart of Easton that need it, I'm not sure how that is a priority to do that. And I'm concerned that, is this the end of it, or is there going to be more after this? Did your board talk about that at all?
The grantees this morning said this was it for CPA. They were not coming back.
Any other comments, questions?
I mean, based on the picture, it looks like they're getting fairly close to the end there, but.
Yeah, if you've been down there, it's actually looking much better than it did. And part of the historic significance is where Oaks Ames Memorial Hall, of course, is a very grand structure. It's an H.H. Richardson, it's very well known. This is an old farmhouse sitting out in a field. It's very iconic. A lot of people see it. It kind of informs the history of that part of the Borderland Park area.
We were definitely in jeopardy of losing the building because it was in such disrepair. I mean, they had blue tarps on it, the water was leaking in. It was in pretty tough shape. So, I mean, it looks remarkably great according to the picture, but.
How does it get maintained? Who pays for that maintenance on an ongoing basis so this asset gets taken care of?
That will be the curator's responsibility going forward. That's part of the curator program.
Somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to include and recommend the $43,045 for the Smith Farm.
Second?
All in favor? Opposed? Okay, one opposed. All right, next up, Article 29.
So this is a proposal, as it says, to repair the posts and the ironwork on the southeastern cemetery, which is opposite Stonehill.
Right, right. Everyone should, this is the cemetery right on 138. For those of us who didn't grow up in Easton, we have a hard time understanding why something on the north side of town is in South Easton. I thought this, when they were first talking about it, this was the cemetery down on Highland Street, or South Street, but it's not. It's the one that's very visible.
I always thought it belonged to Stonehill.
The one across the street from Stonehill?
It is across the street from Stonehill.
I always thought it was Stonehill property.
Anyone have any questions on this one?
And to answer Dave's question, he hasn't asked yet, but there will be historic preservation on the portions of the fence.
Are there other items they're discussing about that cemetery as far as some of the buildings, or, I mean, do they have like a wish list that they've come in with, or is this just like a one-time deal where they want to repair the fence?
I think they've narrowed it down. Arlene Keach actually approached me about CPA funds before, thinking about different things, and they were talking about archiving the records, and that might have been more for the cemetery commission, but I think there are a lot of records related to this, and maybe having on-site storage for that, but of archival quality. They've kind of backed off on that and are thinking about it. It doesn't mean they're not going to come back if they determine they have a better idea of what's really needed for the historic records.
It says that the request does not include a possible future phase of work to fabricate new match and iron fencing. Was there any numbers put to that potential future request? Not at this time.
Any other comments, questions? Somebody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to include and recommend Article 29, CPA funding for the Southeastern Cemetery Corporation, historic fence restoration.
Second.
All in favor? Unanimous.
And the last, not least, is the pickleball court up at Unionville. And this is, it engendered probably some of the largest crowds we've had at CPA meetings in support of any proposal. A lot of enthusiasm, and I would think that would translate into a lot of usage. We had a quite informative presentation about the growth of pickleball nationwide in interest, and so I think this is one that the committee had little concern in supporting.
A couple of points about this project. It meets a need that was identified in the open space plan for recreation for our aging population. At the same time, the plan and the master plan called for recreational opportunities for all ages, and we're being told that a lot of younger people are playing as well, so you really hit the broad spectrum. Another key point is in the Envision Easton master plan, it talked about when looking at recreation facilities and creating new recreational facilities, ensuring that they can be maintained and how they are going to be taken care of into the future. And right now, the way the program works is it's administered through the recreational department, and they pay fees. So those fees, once this is, if the pickleball fields courts are constructed, ongoing maintenance is much like the pavement management program. If you maintain it and you take care of it, it has a much longer lifespan, so the fees can help go for those costs.
Where's it going, next to the tennis courts?
That will be part of the design, figuring out exactly what the configuration is. But that's generally the idea, that they would go and be an extension of the tennis courts. The tennis courts are not going away, and they're currently being used for pickleball.
Right, I've seen that. yeah.
Are they in good condition? Just off topic, but the tennis courts seem to be in good condition.
People are using them,
And so the pickleball would fall under the recreation department?
yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of interest in that,
Yeah.
so.
Make a motion to include and recommend Article 30, CPA funding for the Unionville Field pickleball courts.
Second?
Tom and Chuck, all in favor? Unanimous. All right. Thank you, Jim. I appreciate you coming out.
Thank you so much for the time and the explanations.
Thank you, Stephanie.
We'll see you at town meeting.
Thanks, Stephanie.
I think there's
Stephanie,
actually.
you're on the last
Yep,
one, right?
one last item for Stephanie.
Article 31
Oh,
or 29?
No, it
Zoning
is
amendment.
31, the zoning amendment for compact neighborhood overlay.
oh,
districts.
yes. The planning board voted tonight. This article is being advanced. Last year, when the Planning and Zoning Board recommended the compact neighborhood overlay district, it was always intended, had been discussed, had been presented, that there would be a 2-bedroom restriction on the units. That was inadvertently omitted from the article. So it just is adding in that restriction. And the planning board voted tonight to approve the amendment and recommend it at town meeting.
Stephanie, to be clear, there's no other changes to this. This is an existing zoning bylaw adopted by town meeting. There's basically
Unanimously.
basically a typo on the bylaw, and this
Correct.
is just housekeeping. It does not change substantively what was unanimously adopted by town meeting last year.
Correct.
Any questions?
Make a motion to include Article 31, zoning amendment, Article 9, subsection 23552, compact neighborhood overlay districts.
Include and recommend?
Include and recommend, thank you so much.
Second.
Tom and Craig, all in favor? Unanimous. Great. Thank you, Stephanie. I appreciate you coming down.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie, so much.
Okay. Next is the town administrator's performance review. So every year after the annual town elections, the new board works with the town administrator to come up with the goals and objections in 10 categories. And we have an opportunity to talk about that as a board, to make any changes, to make any additions, to make any comments, and that really sets the direction of what this board wants our town administrator to do for the year. It's very clear, it's a very detailed document, and at the end of the year, before the next election, the idea is to have that same board that created the criteria in the first place to be the board that measures the performance against what they said they wanted in the first place. So I'm just going to go through it very quickly because how many pages is it? 19 pages. It's a lot of detail on here. So it's broken down into the headings, and what happens is Connor will take a look at this at the end of the year. He does his self-evaluation. Then it gets sent out. It gets sent to me. I send it to all of the selectmen. There's a very specific process for this that has to be followed. I send it to the selectmen. The choices that they have on this are exceeds expectations, meets expectations, or failed to meet expectations. It should be known that there should never be a failed to meet expectations surprise in this, because in Connor's contract it says if he's not doing a good job on something, we need to talk to him about that before we ever say something in public or specifically put it in. So, so good news, Connor. There's no fails to meet expectations. And so we all would mark off what we wanted. Then I took everything and compiled it, and I sent it to Lisa, and she printed it out. So that's the process for that. For the financial, there's a long list of bullet items, probably about 20 bullet items, and some of the highlights are there about the budget, strengthening the town's financial management policies and investment in OPEB, formalizing the procurement practices, promoting the town's long-term financial interests, building reserves to the maximum extent possible via appropriation of free cash, actively promote grant writing by all the appropriate departments, devise and implement grant tracking procedures to account for the nature and quality of grants received on an annual basis, hold budget subcommittee meetings to develop strategies and balance budgets, update the town's 5-year capital improvement plan and present the capital budgets to town meeting, utilize mitigation funds from approved housing projects to support one-time capital investments, and build capital stabilization reserves as appropriate, gather departmental budget requests and refine them in coordination with department heads during the winter, implement an unfunded opportunity summary and select department budgets to effectively communicate the town's staffing and operating needs, present a fiscal year 2020 budget and budget message on or before March 1st, support the Finance Committee in their budget review process, hold joint hearings of the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee, continue to work with the school department to fully incorporate the fiscal year 2020 school budget, apply for the Government Finance Officers Associated Distinguished Budget Presentation Award of fiscal year 2020, and issue a summary report of the town's financial conditions measuring the key indicators. Connor, his self-evaluation, has a lot of notes in here on what he did. Some of the highlights on this are issuing a 3-year forecast of revenues and expenditures to provide the policymakers with key data and decision-making. Let me see. I'm trying to get to some of them. The current budget represents a cut in annual reserve spending of $956,815, down 44% since fiscal year 16 when these guidelines were adopted. Since Connor's appointment, the town's stabilization fund has grown by more than $1.1 million, up 70% to a total of $2.76 million, its highest point in decades. We've got several grants. We've got the Housing Choice Grant of $225,000, the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant for $24,500, Complete Streets Infrastructure Grant for $136,000, Green Communities Energy Efficiency Grants of over $131,000, bringing the total to about $750,000 since 2011 for the green communities. And then the SAFER Grant for fiscal year 2019 is $244,313. So there's a lot of really great things happening in that category. And I'm just going to read through. There's some specific comments, but I'm just going to read through. We have exceeds, 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 and meets. So, and people can look at this. We would be here for a long time if I read all the details, but people can look and see what the comments were and so forth. The second.
It's at the bottom of page 3.
Human resources.
Human Resources Management, Labor Relations.
All right, the second one is Human Resources Management and Labor Relations. To prepare and submit a revised personnel plan in accordance with the bylaws, strengthen personnel practices through the formalization and adoption of standardized onboarding and offboarding practices, support compliance with personnel policies of the town through the provision of employee education and trainings, promote institutional resiliency through educational and professional advancement of key leadership and deputy positions, hold meeting of Insurance Advisory Committee to determine future meeting dates as necessary, and a regular review of insurance benefits, work in good faith with department heads and selectmen to resolve employee grievances at the lowest possible level, and complete negotiations with the town bargaining units to secure successor agreements. The fiscal year 2019 employee insurance budget saw an increase of only 1.01% over the prior year based on GIC premium rates for fiscal year 2020. We are projecting another highly advantageous year with an increase of only 1.28%. Let's see. And their incentive program saved almost $100,000 in premium costs for the town in fiscal year 2019. So we have an exceeds expectations, meets, and meets on that one. Communications and community relations. To attend community and civic events as time allows. Develop positive and productive relationships with civic, business, and educational groups. Introduce the assistant town administrator to key civic, business, educational, and other groups. Continue to foster an open door environment in the town offices. Conduct the town's business in an open and transparent manner. Maintain credibility with the media and general public. Engage local press and media outlets through press releases and other communication tools to promote the town of Easton. And highlight the major successes, strengthen the town's new media capabilities by launching a new Town of Easton website, decentralize social media communications to empower larger public-facing departments to communicate timely and accurate information. As of mid-March, Connor attended approximately 70 board, committee, community, and civic events in his office in this fiscal year. That's a lot of extra meetings on top of working full-time, more than full-time for the town. So thank you for that, Connor. That's a big number. Key departments such as police and fire have expanded their public communications footprint by partnering with public relations partners to provide high-quality and timely information to the public. There's more than 1,400 followers. They've got a big following, and it's very helpful to that group. So we have meets, exceeds, and meets for that. The quality of life, I have to say, when I was going through this and I was making my notes, I had to go back to this like 3 times because it was so long. It took a long time just to read through all of these, so I apologize for the abbreviated version of this. Number 4, quality of life. Working with the Department of Public Works, planning, utility companies, and business partners in the Northeastern Village to design and begin the construction of the infrastructure project. Re-examine viability of Easton's Community Choice Clean Energy Aggregation Plan for the bulk procurement of electrical supply. Support the Cable Advisory Committee and Board of Selectmen in the negotiation of successor licensing agreements. Advocate for necessary renovations and repairs to public facilities such as Frothingham Hall, the Department of Public Works, all within financial constraints. Serve on the School Planning Committee to support the public schools in the continuation of the MSBA process. With the Easton Public Schools, advocate for a successful center school project to meet the educational needs of all the Easton children. Utilize local businesses to procure goods and services within the confines of state law. Support the Substance Abuse Coalition partnerships in Easton, and act as an ambassador of the town when presenting opportunities for business, residents, cultural enrichment, highlight the amenities of the town that make it an attractive place to live, work, and visit. And we have meets, and meets on that one. Planning and economic development. Carefully monitor the approved housing developments to ensure timely permitting and construction that achieves the town's goal of reaching and maintaining the 10% affordable housing. Leverage Easton's designation as a housing choice community to support grant awards and the promotion of the housing production plan. Work collaboratively with the Department of Planning and Economic Development and Planning and Zoning Board to promote redevelopment of rezoned districts that encourage targeted housing and commercial development. Promote the benefits and success of the CPA Act in Easton. Support the continued implementation of Queesit Development Agreement. Foster an environment conducive to the successful development through pre-permitting of meetings with key stakeholders. Continue to provide staff support to the Economic Development Council. Advance the town's wastewater planning in Queesit Sewer, Five Corners, and in the Industrial Park. Promote private connections to the sewer district to incentivize redevelopment. Conduct district improvement financing feasibility study. Establish the DIF to support the infrastructure. Support successful redevelopment of the Northeastern Village. Implement the Massachusetts Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Planning Grant to strengthen the town's climate change preparedness. Collaborate with the Easton Shoveltown Cultural District to promote the Northeastern Village area's cultural and historic amenities, support the efforts of the 524 Depot Street Master Plan Development Team, support the Conservation Commission and the Assistant Planning Director in their possible review of the town wetlands protection regulations, and support the Affordable Housing Trust in their creation of affordable units. Easton was one of only 19 municipalities to receive the initial designation of housing choice from the Commonwealth, and then we sought and captured a $225,000 grant for the Five Corners Sewer Project. The town also secured funding and then completed a DIF feasibility study, which included a visioning charrette, and is proceeding with the DIF district and financing program for the Five Corners area to support the sewer project, reduce betterments for property owners, and identify future revenues for infrastructure improvements. There is meets, and meets. The next is the infrastructure and public works to prepare for the implementation of the MS4 stormwater discharge permit during fiscal year 2019, assist the DPW director in planning and construction of the pavement management program, the Depot Street TIP program, the Route 138 Union Street TIP program, 138 Elm Street, South Street culvert replacement, complete the construction of the Queesit sewer to implement the town wastewater management plan, and prepare for construction of Five Corners Phase 2 for calendar year 2019 and 2020. The DPW's advocacy for Easton's TIP programs have resulted in our receipt of 10.4% of the project funding in 2012 to 2023, despite representing only 6.4% of the communities eligible. So that's a huge amount there. The town has led a coordinated effort with planning, DPW, finance, and many other stakeholders in the community to advance the Five Corners Sewer Phase 2. The project design is now complete and currently out to bid to begin construction for scheduled this summer. Another huge infrastructure project there. So this is meets. Town government and effectiveness, number 7. To ensure that appointed boards and committees are adequately supported by staff within the limitations of the budget constraints, and provide ad hoc support to unstaffed boards if and when possible. Promote the best practices for board and committee officials through the administration of social media policy, ethics, open meeting law materials, and training opportunities. Improve distribution and administration of board and committee policies and training materials through the coordination with the Office of the Town Clerk. Promote high-risk reduction and best property and casualty liability insurance practices by supporting Human Resources Coordinator and Executive Loss Committee. Strive to deliver the best possible quality of services to the public with courtesy, professionalism, and respect at all times. Set annual goals to review the performance of the key operation deliverables of essential department heads to ensure accountability and effectiveness. Continue to properly update the town code to reflect town meeting actions. Explore opportunities for departmental reorganization to achieve efficiencies where possible. Review e-permitting platforms to assess next steps for processes and improvement. Support the planning department's revision to doing business in Easton, and hold routine department head meetings to promote effective communications and coordinations among town leadership. In October, Connor hosted 2 board and committee training sessions, partnering with the town clerk and the town council to train on board and committee basics, open meeting law, ethics, and social media policy. About the Loss Control Committee, this committee continues to pay dividends for the town, not just through cost avoidance by limiting liability, but in actual dollars by earning premium credits towards our property casualty and liability insurance policy, most recently reducing the premiums by almost $55,000 in 2018. In total, the premium credits have saved the town $455,000 since its establishment in 2010, which is a huge success. Following 2 exhaustive phases, the town code was updated to be fully accurate and has since then been routinely updated following town meeting actions when necessary. The Attorney General filings are ensured by a new set of compliance checks. So we have meets, meets, and exceeds on this one. On item 8, we have service and support to the Board of Selectmen. Keep the Selectmen informed of matters under his control, provide the Selectmen with professional advice and recommendations as appropriate, prepare analysis regarding the various issues regarding the town, provide Selectmen with routine written summaries of town's activities, include regular departmental updates to the Board as time allows, and treat all members of the Board with equal trust and respect to foster a productive working relationship. And we had exceeds, meets, exceeds, meets, exceeds on that. Inter and intra-governmental relationship to foster positive relationships with town committees by meeting with chairpeople, attending meetings as necessary, and supporting the goals and objectives of the boards. And we have a lot of boards and committees, so that in itself is quite an undertaking. Promote professional and respectful relationships with all boards and committee members, valuing their contributions to the community. Support the Selectmen's establishment of ad hoc boards and committees to address unique community needs. Maintain positive relationships with Easton's legislative delegation and municipal professionals throughout the Commonwealth. Review, analyze, represent, and present the position of the town and Board of Selectmen relative to implemented and proposed legislation and governmental policies and regs. Stay abreast of government legislation, policy, and regulations. Serve on the Southeastern Massachusetts Regional Emergency Communications Center Board of Directors in continued support of the town's ongoing transition to regional dispatch, and serve on the regional professional boards and/or committees as appropriate. Connor regularly advocates for the needs of the town to our delegation, and the current fiscal year saw our delegation secure $125,000 in state funding for necessary capital upgrades for the Northeastern wastewater treatment facility. And that also, I'd like to just give a shout out to our legislators who do support and really fight for that funding for us. So we have meets, exceeds, meets on that one. Professional and personal growth. The town administrator attends professional meetings, seminars, conferences, including the MMA annual conference. Attend professional trainings to maintain necessary certifications, including the Massachusetts Certified Public Purchasing Officer Program. Continue as an active participant of the Massachusetts Municipal Managers Association. Promote the profession of the municipal management through membership on educational committees such as Bridgewater State University MPA, Alumni Board, the MMA Suffolk University Certificate in Local Government and Leadership and Management Steering Committee, and to continue active membership in state and national and professional organizations. We have meets, exceeds, meets, and meets on that. So the reason that I went through so much detail on that wasn't to keep everybody here late, but it's just to give people an idea that there's a lot of stuff that we asked of Connor this year, and it feels like a long time ago, but when Connor started, he was really starting from scratch in this role, even though he had been working into it, but we didn't give any kind of like breezeway for like year one, let's ramp up. And we probably would have done that if it wasn't Connor, but we expected an awful lot from him, held the bar very high. And I think that he has done a tremendous job taking us from where we were a year ago to where we are now. All our union contracts, where we only have 3 left, those have all been successfully negotiated in a way, you know, that Connor approached it, to be really grateful to our employees and to be very respectful of the taxpayers. There's a lot of infrastructure projects going on that it looks easy and smooth because nobody sees, you know, all the hard work that's going on behind the curtain on that. And I think that, you know, we see that, and I hope the public will see it and appreciate some of those things. So if the other board members want to make any comments?
Yeah, I would agree, Connor. Honestly, you know, it's hard to believe so much time has passed, but the way that you think ahead on a lot of issues in terms of your negotiations or including certain aspects, the way that you've worked specifically with me on the budget subcommittee, the information that you have on hand, always prepared, is appreciated. You don't think just about now, you think about the future, and that's greatly valued. I do want to point out something, Connor, that you wrote at the very beginning of yours, which is that success has many parents. And I think that is a great aspect to your personality. I think the way that you work with your team and you acknowledge them, support them, I think that certainly your team plays a tremendous role in your success, as it does in any teams we're all on as individuals. So the fact that you've done a great job in assembling a great team, that you have a great team, I think plays a huge role in that. And that speaks to your leadership as well. I think leaders play a role in the team and the development. So credit to the rest of the parents or siblings of the success as well. Honestly, I was thinking how you had a lot of meets expectations, and the reality is that we probably have some very high expectations for you, and I think you also have high expectations for yourself. There are plenty of exceeds, but I think, quite frankly, that there are just high expectations for this town, this community. We all hold ourselves accountable to that. And I think in many cases that there could have been more exceeds, so to speak, if we didn't hold ourselves to such high standards. So there's just so much work and effort. And Dottie, what you went through in 19 pages, and it took us that long just to have the highlights, makes me reflect back that there are all the months, the weeks, the days, the meetings, the efforts, the prep that go into it. So I am tremendously grateful for all the effort that you put forth.
But I would follow up with what Tom was saying. Affiliated with leadership, I think of the word professionalism. And I think he exhibits that in everything that he does with us. There are specifics that I could get into, such as the conservation of reserves. He's done a fantastic job with that. The preparing for the understanding of the liabilities that we have for pensions and the insurance gains that he's had. But he's been to so many meetings, it's amazing. And he's exhibited professionalism again in dealing with everyone on the boards and in the community. And I think that's terrific.
Well said.
I have enjoyed the decision that we made a year ago to hire you as the full-time town administrator. And I find it exciting when I look back and say, look, I made a good decision, and I was part of a good decision. I particularly appreciate the conversations that we have about areas of budget and municipal governance that I'm not an expert on, and that you take the time to help me understand that. I also appreciate my colleagues who are financial wizards, so that they're very helpful too. But I really appreciate that. Sometimes I ask some questions that you've probably explained to me 5 times, but it takes a while for that to sink in. I find that everybody that I've talked to in terms of town committees and boards that interacts with you has a very positive feedback on that. I know that our legislative delegation is very fond of how you interact with them, and that you're very accessible to them. I once again enjoyed the last year of working with you. I look forward to many more years if we can do that.
I don't want to repeat everything they said, but just I am in full agreement with what they had to say, especially what Craig just said about other town employees are responsive to you. They enjoy working with you. Personally, I've appreciated the fact that you're a great communicator. You're very responsive. If you have any questions, you're on it. You're always prepared. Watching you grow over the last year, it's been nice to watch, and I'm impressed. I agree. A lot of these templates are kind of tough because you got a lot of meets expectations, and I think we do set the bar high. It's unfortunate that there's not more of an ability to point out some of the great things that you've done. You just have to. It's like all or nothing on these meets or exceeds expectations. So I'm not really crazy about the template, but overall, I think you've really grown, and you should be proud of yourself. It's been a pleasure working with you.
Do you want to comment, Connor?
Well, thank you. It means a lot to me. I've been in Easton for more than 7 years and probably more than 7 jobs. A lot has changed for me personally, and but one thing has always been the case that Easton has been good to me. I've enjoyed working here. I feel very fortunate to work here for a few reasons, not only for the tremendous opportunity I've had in my own career, but how much I've been able to learn from everyone here, both boards, committees, school officials, and the staff. Tom, you pointed out, I think it's really important. I almost, despite the fact that I'm in 70 televised meetings every few months, I, as a person, don't necessarily really want to draw attention to what I'm doing. So even doing a self-evaluation kind of feels a little unnatural. So that's why I wanted to start it with saying that I really do, think it's important to look at a part of the proverb that success has many parents, because I am certainly not construing a self-evaluation to take individual credit for every good thing that has happened. That's not how teams work. None of this, I couldn't be successful, and we as a team couldn't be successful without, a tremendous amount of hard work from the town's dedicated staff, a highly, exceptionally professional staff. Our partners with the schools, we had great dialogue with them tonight. They're tremendous. I've been fortunate to work with them a lot more than I had in my other roles on things like the school planning committee. And as a new parent, I see things like that, and I just think it's the coolest thing in the world that there are so many members of the community from so many different cross sections of the community working on something as important as trying to build a top of the line facility for kids to get a top of the line education. The elected and appointed volunteers, we saw another example tonight, which is becoming kind of routine, where the board solicits volunteers to do important work. We're really lean staffed here. We rely on literally hundreds of citizen and business volunteers to do important work stemming from regulatory, zoning board of appeals to the Shoveltown Cultural District Management Partners team. I think I got that name right. And the board has, I think, the distinct privilege that you frequently have too many people saying, hey, I want to come give my time for free just because I love it here. And I think that kind of can summarize all this, that there's a lot of hard work and effort and labors of love by a lot of people involved in having the town be a great place. And I'm very proud that I get to be a part of that. I do not take sole credit for it. That would be silly, but I'm very fortunate. And on the note of team, I do really, in particular, this office has gone through a lot in the past couple of years. I was in a different role. Mike and Lisa were not here. And they hit the ground running under some pretty difficult circumstances, to be completely honest, that I think we're all aware of. And both took it in stride and have done a tremendous amount to support the board and me and this town. So I would like to thank them, as well as all the department heads, everyone throughout the organization. It's a pleasure, and I'll stop rambling. But I've been very fortunate. So thank you.
Well, I was telling Connor that I was at a workshop a few weeks ago, and we talk about the way that you plan and execute your work, and the way that you're really supposed to wrap that up is a time for reflection on it. But we're always so busy, and we're all probably busy like that in our real life and work too, that you don't really take that time to sit down and really reflect on what you've done as a team. So I would encourage people to take a look at this document. It's going to be online, and really think about, personalities aside from everything that's going on in the world, look at what this town has done. Everybody loves this town. There's so many people working on it, and just looking at this document to see what we accomplished in a year together, everybody should be very proud of that, and thank you for leading the way on it, Connor.
Thank you all.
Well said.
So we don't have to vote on this, do we?
I would ask that you just vote to accept it as presented. We'll append it into one document and make it available for public consumption. But I think we could have a discussion about it if you like. It's the first one. I certainly don't think there's harm in having the board vote as a body to accept, because it's something that you didn't touch on in your introduction, but I think is important, is that this is not an edited document you took just for
Right, I cut and pasted.
Cut and pasted
So
the
if there's
exact
typos in it, it's because
reviews.
you guys had typos in it.
Fair enough.
Of everyone,
Fair
so-
enough.
I tried to proofread mine, but you never know. There could be typos in that too.
So I would ask if a board is willing just to vote to accept the evaluation as presented.
I make
The
that motion.
motion to accept the evaluation as presented?
Second?
Let's, Chuck and Craig, all in favor?
Thank you all.
Unanimous. Okay, and the next item up is a discussion and vote, extension of the employment agreement with Connor. So Connor is looking to extend his, it's currently set to expire June 30th, 2021.
Right.
For one, and he wants to extend it for one additional year at the existing rate of annual salary increase and no changes to the term.
What is the existing rate?
And it would be
Just to confirm.
2.5% on my base.
Point of information, was this requested by Connor, or is this just part of the contract kind of routine?
I've requested it. It is a good time to have that conversation. You've reviewed my performance. I'm very gracious for that review. And I am asking that the board consider keeping, right now my contract is set to expire in 2 years. I'm just asking that that be kept at 3 years, because it's been almost 2 years since I was appointed, so time has certainly flown. So, but this is my request.
We can technically keep a 5-year contract.
I believe under the Modernization Act, you could have up to 5 years for now. I'm just asking for a 1-year extension.
Typically, town administrators will have like a 3-year rolling.
Yep. Okay.
I think
It would be June 30th of 2022.
That's right. Right now, my employment agreement ends June 30th, 2021, 2 years from June.
I think it's important to have discussions like this, so I'm comfortable, with just actually having this presented. I think it's important to bring them up because there are certain big, long-term things, programs, plans, initiatives that take time to develop. And I think if you are on a trajectory where you are engaging the town and the community or an organization in a positive way on those issues, then you want to do what you can to maintain that trajectory, because it takes some time to get to the heights that we would like to get to. So I applaud bringing the topic up just fundamentally. I think it's important to do so. I also happen to reflect favorably on the request to do so. Because for all the aforementioned, I think that all of the items we talked about in the performance evaluation indicate we're on a positive trajectory with what we're achieving. I think we have a long way to go, to be candid, at least personally, for where I would like to see the town and the community get to. And I think Connor would be an instrumental part in helping us achieve where I think we can get the town of Easton to, and the benefits that the community will get from that. So I'm comfortable having this discussion and look favorably on it.
I absolutely concur.
So do I.
Do you want to make a motion?
I make a motion to extend the employment agreement with the town and the town administrator at the existing rate of 2.5% on top of the base with no other changes.
Till June 30th.
Till June 30th, 2022.
So Tom made the motion,
Second that motion.
Craig seconded, all in favor? Unanimous.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Connor.
Town administrator notes?
I do not have any prepared. A lot of great stuff covered tonight, so thank you all.
Okay. Selectmen notes?
Dottie brought to our attention that a longtime member of the community, Doug Mullen, passed away at the end of March. Doug was 90 years old. He was a member of this board for 25 years. He was on the Finance Committee for probably 9 years. I used to go over to his residence at Five Corners and ask him how I was doing, and he was a valuable resource to me and to this community. His wake is on the 11th, 6 to 8, and I believe the funeral is on Friday. So I just wanted the community to be aware of that. Many people probably are already aware of that. But he was quite a character and quite a member of this community for a long, long time.
Very good man.
So how did he say you were doing?
He said I was doing okay.
Okay. Okay, and press notes or public notes?
Just on a corner thing, I know it was a difficult decision way back when.
You want to come up and?
And just say your name, just for the people at home.
863 Depot Street, Southeastern. I'm Dr. Dottie a long time ago, as you remember. I just want to say I know it was a difficult decision back then, and some of you weren't here, but I talked to certain people, and I told you so.
So Charlie takes all the credit.
No, I just take some of it.
Thanks, Charlie.
All right, thank you, everybody. It's been a long night, and we'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Unanimous.